Simon & Schuster Audioworks presents Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Emissary. Novelization by J.M. Dillard, based on the teleplay by Michael Piller. Story by Rick Berman and Michael Piller. Performed by Nana Visitor.
Ben Sisko's first encounter with Jean-Luc Picard shattered his life forever. On stardate 44002.3, a fleet of 40 Federation starships received orders to proceed to Wolf 359 to intercept a Borg vessel on its way to Earth. The Saratoga was the first to arrive. Lieutenant Commander Benjamin Sisko served as the Saratoga's first officer. Like the rest of the crew, Sisko had never seen a Borg, and knew little of the race save that Starfleet Command deemed them a grave threat. He knew that most who engaged them perished. Sisko was not afraid. He had absolute faith in himself, his captain, his ship, the fleet. But he had not been prepared for the size of the thing. On Saratoga's main bridge view screen, the Borg ship hung gray and motionless against a backdrop of stars, dwarfing the Federation vessel with its vastness. It was a huge, ungainly cube of spaceborne metal with thousands of tiny compartments, like a gigantic metal hive built by insects. Captain Storl leaned forward in his chair and frowned, a small, faint crease appearing between his dark, upswept brows. Sisko took note of the gesture. For the captain, it was the equivalent of a muttered curse. Storl was a Vulcan, dedicated to the repression of feeling and the pursuit of pure reason. The screen flickered and went dark. In place of the Borg ship, a face appeared. A human face. Jean-Luc Picard, the famous captain of the Enterprise, stood on the bridge of the Borg vessel. And yet, it was not Picard. Not human. Not machine, but a monstrous marriage of metal and flesh. One of Picard's arms had been extended with an intricate mechanical prosthesis. His eyes augmented with a sensor scope protruding from one temple. His pale face was frighteningly blank. His dignity, his warmth, were gone. If any part of Jean-Luc Picard remained, the man-machine hybrid gave no sign. The sensor scope flashed red, whirred softly and angled forward, studying the humans with an intelligence as empty and cold as space. I am Locutus. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. You will disarm all weapons and escort us to Sector 001. Sisko's lips parted, half in astonishment, half in outrage. Like hell we will. 001 was Earth. Captain Storl's gaze serenely affirmed Sisko's sentiment. Sisko stared down at his viewer and saw a schematic display of 3 starships gliding silently into formation around the Saratoga. The Gage, the Kyushu, and the Melbourne. Captain Storl then gave a series of orders. Move us to position Alpha, Ensign. Load all torpedo bays. Ready phasers. Picard's image disappeared abruptly and was replaced once more by the Borg ship. Rannoch, the Bolian tactical officer, moved pale blue hands over his console. The Borg ship is attempting to lock onto the Melbourne with its tractor beam. Captain Storl's attention did not waver from the screen. Target the origin point of that beam, Lieutenant. Fire when ready. Sisko watched the screen as Saratoga's phasers and torpedoes streaked through the void, flared briefly against the leaden surface of the Borg ship, then dimmed. Simultaneously, the Borg ship fired a bright, searing beam, striking the Melbourne. For an instant, the Melbourne trembled, illumined against the blackness by a deadly coronal light. Sisko squinted against the painful brightness on the screen, forced himself not to look away as the Melbourne's hull exploded into scorched, hurtling fragments. Forced himself not to think of those dead and dying on a bridge, very like the one he was on. A part of his mind screamed that they were all certainly about to die, that he should leave his post, find his wife and son, spend his last few seconds with them. But the rational part knew that Jennifer and Jake's best chance lay in his ability to perform his duty. The deck lurched. Sisko staggered, regained his footing as Lieutenant Rannoch called out from his console. "The Borg are attempting to lock onto us." Captain Storrell clutched the arms of his chair for balance. "Evasive maneuvers. Delta pattern." At the navigation console, Ensign Tamamota glanced down at her readout. "Captain, we're not moving. They've locked on." Sisko watched the screen as the gauge and the Kyushu opened fire on the Borg vessel, trying in vain to save the Saratoga, just as Saratoga had done for the Melbourne. Feverishly, Rannoch worked his console to maintain the Saratoga's shields, but with no effect. "Shields are going." The bridge went dark, and with a roar, erupted in flame. Sisko was slammed to the deck. When Saratoga righted herself, he drew in a lungful of smoke, coughed, and pushed himself to his knees. The bridge lay dark and smoldering, illumined only by the sparks raining from damaged consoles. Sisko strained to hear his captain's calm voice. Being a Vulcan and stronger than most of his crew, Storrell would be the first to recover, if he was alive. "Damage report!" No one answered. The emergency lights flickered once, then came on. Sisko pushed himself unsteadily to his feet. "Damage report!" In the dim light, Rannoch, wounded, bleeding, pulled himself up on his console, while Sisko moved quickly from body to warm body, feeling for pulses, finding none. Captain Storrell's unseeing eyes were staring serenely through the haze. Sisko drew his hand away from the Vulcan and rose slowly to face Lieutenant Rannoch, who hunched over his console in obvious pain. "Direct hit. Decks 1 through 4. Sisko knew that his wife Jennifer and son Jake were there. He touched his comm insignia. "Engineering, your status." There was no reply. Sisko and Rannoch exchanged grim looks. Suddenly, the computer's loud, overriding voice echoed on the silent, haze-filled bridge. "Warning. Damage to warp core. Containment failure in 4 minutes. Sisko hit his insignia again. "All hands, prepare to abandon ship." As he moved toward the lift, he kept thinking about Jennifer and Jake. Then he turned back. Rannoch was still huddled over the console. "Lieutenant, let's get the civilians to the escape pods." Rannoch nodded and followed. When the turbolift doors opened, Sisko felt heat on his face. He and Rannoch stepped onto the deck and staggered to the left. The deck was tilting, stabilizers were failing. Life support would be next. Sisko calmly reasoned that he would be able to make it to his quarters to see if Jennifer... Fire leapt at them from a side corridor, singeing the shoulder of Sisko's uniform. He grabbed Rannoch's arm, and together they fought their way past the flames, toward a frantic group of civilians struggling with armloads of personal possessions. Sisko shouted over the roar of flames. "Leave everything! Go to your assigned evacuation area, now!" Sisko continued on, passing other civilians, searching for 2 faces. "Warning, damage to warp core. Containment failure in 3 minutes. When he arrived at his quarters, the door was jammed open. Thick, dark smoke billowed out. Sisko stepped into it without hesitation. An explosion had ripped a large hole in the deck, allowing fire to leap up from the level below. His quarters, a lifetime of accumulated possessions, were destroyed. He pushed his way through scorched debris. "Jennifer!" He pushed aside smoldering fragments of furniture and twisted metal bulkheads, searching. At the edge of the largest pile of collapsed bulkhead and wreckage, he uncovered her hand, limp and smudged with soot from the smoke. He set to work with a strength and intensity that bordered on insanity. The edge of the bulkhead was jagged, sharp. His hands became bloody and blistered by the heated metal. Within seconds, he had uncovered Jennifer's twisted upper torso and discovered Jake's small, dark body beside her. She had shielded the child with her body and taken the brunt of the blow. He could see no blood, but in the darkness and the smoke, it was difficult to be sure. It's gonna be okay. I'll get you out of there. You're gonna be okay. He strained, letting the sharp, hot metal cut into his palms. But he could not lift the wreckage that crushed his wife's lower body. In desperation, he circled, cleared away more debris, found a way to reach underneath the wreckage and pull Jake free. The boy was unconscious and badly bruised, but breathing. The boy moved slightly in his grasp. Okay, Jake. We'll just get your mom now and get out of here. But Jennifer was pinned too tightly. Cisco was struggling to lift the wreckage again when Rannoch's silhouette appeared in the doorway. Commander, sir, we have to get to the escape pods. Cisco stopped pushing against the bulkhead and met the Bolian's startled gaze that focused on his charred, bloodied hands. Cisco stared down at them numbly. The only thing that mattered was Jennifer. Rannoch, just help me get her free. That's an order. The Bolian stared at him in mute horror. He reached down and scooped Jake up in his strong arms. She's gone, Commander. There's nothing we can do. Warning. Damage to warp core. Containment failure in 2 minutes. Cisco shook his head. He knelt beside Jennifer and took her cool, limp hand in his bloody one. If she had to die, then he could not leave her to do so alone. You go ahead, Lieutenant. Take the boy. A security officer appeared in the doorway, and Rannoch handed the boy off to him, then grasped Cisco's arm and yanked him to his feet. Now, sir. No. I can't leave without her. Rannoch pulled with all his might. Powerless against the Bolian's greater strength, Cisco was propelled toward the door. Damn it! We can't leave her here! Rannoch replied by pushing him out the door. Cisco did not remember running through the burning corridors. Did not remember joining the dozen others in the cramped escape pod. Cisco remembered only 2 things. The sight of Jake, still unconscious in the security officer's arms, and the sight of the dying Saratoga as other tiny pods sailed free. Cisco made his way to the porthole and stared at the receding wreckage. Space was lit up like a summer sky with heat lightning. The Kyushu was gone now, and the gauge would be next. The Borg were right. Resistance was futile. All was destroyed. In his mind, he lay dead beside Jennifer, their bodies consumed by flame. He watched as Saratoga exploded like a small sun and let himself be blinded by the light. Three years after the incident at Wolf 359, Commander Benjamin Cisco stood in the soft grass, fondly watching his 12-year-old son. Under the shade of a large old oak, Jake sat fishing on a large rock, trousers rolled up to the knees, bare feet dangling in the water. Hey there, son. Jake turned at the sound of his father's voice, lips stretched in a reluctant grin. A shaft of sunlight pierced the branches and gleamed in his dark, curly hair. The smile so increased his resemblance to Jennifer that Cisco drew in a silent, painful breath as he crossed over and perched beside his son on the rock. Time had not dulled the memories of his wife. Cisco returned to the horrors of the Saratoga each night in dreams. At least, Jake was there each day to remind him of the good things that might otherwise be forgotten. Jennifer's same shy, crooked grin. Jennifer's gestures. Jennifer's good nature and complete inability to stay angry about anything for more than a full minute at a time. Jake was angry now, and like his mother, doing a miserable job of hiding it. How they biting? Jake shrugged and turned his attention to the red and white bobbing cork. "Small fry. Throw him back. Want to go for a swim?" "Don't have time, son. We gotta get ready." A sullen look came over the boy's face, and Cisco experienced a pang of guilt. "It won't be so bad, Jake. I've heard Bajor is a beautiful world." Beautiful, he thought, before the Cardassian conquerors departed, leaving massive destruction in their wake. "So why can't we live on the planet instead of some old space station?" "Well, it's what Starfleet decided." When Cisco heard that he had been assigned to the space station, he protested, to no avail. Starfleet obviously felt his career had stalled at Utopia Planitia, and so presented him with a challenge. Deep Space Nine. Cisco did not want a challenge. He no longer gave a damn whether his career stagnated or not. The promotion to full commander seemed meaningless. Before Jennifer's death, he had been unrelentingly ambitious, his career second in importance only to his family. But now, none of it mattered except Jake. Cisco was seriously considering leaving the fleet for the boy's sake. He'd even been looking into some civilian job possibilities on Earth. Thus far, none had panned out. Jake stared down at the water, at the reflection of the young, barefoot boy frowning back at him. "Dad, you promised we'd stay on shore duty." "The station is in orbit around Bajor, Jake. It'll be just like shore duty." "There be any kids there?" "Absolutely. Lots of kids." Cisco hoped like hell he was telling the truth. "Bridge to Cisco." Cisco straightened, touched his insignia. "Yes, Captain." "We're approaching Deep Space Nine, Commander. We'll be docking in 7 minutes. Cisco put an arm around his son's stiff shoulders. "Come on, Jake. We'll take the pond with us. Computer, end program." The yellow grid of the holodeck walls replaced the grass, water, trees. Jake slung the pole over his shoulder as they exited. He kept his sullen expression and avoided Cisco's eyes as they strode down the corridor, but at an observation window, he paused, wide-eyed with curiosity. Cisco followed his son's gaze. On the view screen, the space station hung amid the stars, the planet Bajor hovering nearby. A handful of ships were docked at the station, including one Cisco recognized as the Enterprise. Deep Space Nine had a gothically ornate alien beauty. The Cardassians were master architects, but their sweeping, angular style was dark and brooding. The metal had an almost organic look. It made him think of the Borg and Locutus, and from there, he was in his quarters aboard the Saratoga again, struggling vainly to free Jennifer's trapped, lifeless body. Then the scene aboard the Saratoga was obliterated by the sudden flash of an image. A strange, middle-aged woman reaching long, gentle fingers toward his face. All part of a forgotten dream from the night before. The woman's eyes were dark, unfathomably wise, full of peace and knowing and pain. The woman's face metamorphosed, grew younger, became Jennifer's face. And she spoke one word. "Welcome." Cisco tried to remember more of the dream, but could retrieve only the image of the woman and the light, and a strange sense of coming home. Jake looked questioningly at his father with a slight, curious, Jennifer-like frown. Cisco pulled himself from the strange reverie and patted his son on the shoulder. "Come on, Jake. Let's go." With Jake beside him, Cisco stepped inside the space station's airlock. Lying on his back on the floor was a Starfleet ensign. He apparently had removed a console panel and was reaching up inside to manually work the airlock controls. Ruddy-faced, sweating, he glanced over at Cisco and Jake. "Sorry about that, Commander. All the interlock servos in this airlock were stripped by the Cardassians. It's a junkyard the bloody Cardis left us with, if you ask me." Cisco grunted his understanding as he surveyed the damage. Although he was not a man given to prejudice, Sisko was less than kindly disposed toward the Cardassian culture, which embraced treachery and vindictiveness. The door clanked shut. The ensign wriggled out from under the console and got to his feet. He extended his hand to Sisko. "Miles O'Brien, your Chief Operations Officer." Sisko nodded. "My son, Jake." O'Brien gave Jake a special smile, then turned back to Sisko. "Can I show you to your quarters, Commander?" Sisko nodded, hoping that the quarters were in better shape than the airlock. Jake stared glumly down the gloomy, deserted corridor, then looked at O'Brien. "Are there any kids here?" "Kids? Well, sure, some. I have a 2-year-old, but she's a little young for you. I think I've seen a Ferengi boy about your age, if he hasn't left with the others." Jake seemed clearly intrigued by the notion as a set of doors opened and O'Brien ushered them out. "The promenade, or at least what remains of it. During their occupation, the Cardis sold commercial concessions to the highest bidder. Kept the mining crews entertained." Sisko saw that the place had obviously served as a combination free port and flea market, with a collection of kiosks, restaurants, gambling casinos, and bars. He suspected some of them housed sexual holosuites in their secluded upstairs. The promenade even had a Bajoran temple. The place had no doubt been bustling during the Cardassian occupation, but now it appeared almost deserted and ravaged by vandals. Storefronts had been broken out, walls scorched from phaser blasts. Sisko had known something of the destruction inflicted on Bajor's surface. After a century of occupation, the Cardassians' intense mining operations had exhausted the planet's resources, and they had wearied of the decades-long struggle against Bajoran terrorists. They departed, but not without first poisoning the wells and scorching the ground, leaving behind a wasteland whose inhabitants were forced to turn to the Federation for help. O'Brien's expression was grim. "I'm told the Cardassians decided to have some fun the day they left. 4 Bajorans were killed trying to protect their shops." They passed by a bar and casino where 3 Ferengi were packing up equipment. Sisko thought of Jake, alone and forlorn, playing amid the rubble. "Why hasn't anybody cleaned this up? We've got all available personnel assigned to repairing primary systems, sir. The Cardassians took every component of value. We have virtually no defenses. Major Kira, the Bajoran attaché, and I decided..." Sisko cut him off. "Understood. But what about the civilians who operated these shops?" "A few are trying to rebuild, but most are packing up to leave." They walked in silence for a few moments. With each step, Sisko grew more apprehensive, more guilty over where he had brought Jake. Ahead of them, a Bajoran temple, simple and elegant compared to the surrounding Cardassian structures, caught Sisko's eye. As they approached, someone stirred in the arched, shadowed entryway. An elderly Bajoran monk, dressed in traditional robes, his eyes large and compelling beneath a thick fringe of white brow. "Welcome, Commander." Sisko hesitated. Welcome? He remembered the dream from the night before, the dream of the wise woman, and for the first time, he realized she had been alien, Bajoran. The monk wore a faint beatific smile. "Please enter. The prophets await you." Sisko flashed suddenly on a memory. The Saratoga's darkened bridge, the smell of smoke, struggling uselessly to raise the flaming bulkhead, the sight of Jennifer, motionless, trapped. He shook the memory off and looked at the monk. Another time, perhaps. The 3 continued past, and when they were barely in earshot, Sisko heard the monk say softly, knowingly, "Another time." O'Brien watched as father and son took a few tentative steps inside their new quarters. The room was typically Cardassian, all in shades of gray and black. The boy grew noticeably glum, and Sisko seemed to fare no better. O'Brien forced himself to smile. The boy wandered off into the adjacent bedroom. O'Brien took advantage of his absence to sidle alongside the commander and speak quietly. "Sir, I wouldn't allow the boy to go roaming. We're still having some security problems. Oh, and I almost forgot. Captain Picard wants to see you as soon as possible." Oddly, Cisco changed the subject swiftly, as if he hadn't registered O'Brien's statement. "Any word on our science and medical officers?" "They're expected tomorrow." Jake appeared in the doorway, thin, dark brows knitted together in disapproval. "Dad, I hate this place. We're just going to have to rough it until we get things up and running, Jake. I want you to stay here until I come back, okay?" Jake nodded in a manner that indicated it was definitely not okay. O'Brien and the new commander took the turbolift to Ops, the heart of the station. Cisco tilted his head back to take in the multi-tiered facility, where a handful of Bajorans and Starfleet personnel were already busily at work. O'Brien absently wiped beads of perspiration from his forehead. "Operations houses computer and life support, tactical controls, master communications, and the transporter pad. Obviously, we've got a bit of work to do." Commander Cisco nodded, still gazing up appreciatively at the different levels. O'Brien stretched out an arm and pointed at the metal grid mezzanine and a small balcony. "That's the prefix office up there. Major Kira has been using it." Cisco glanced around, searching. "The only office in Ops?" O'Brien gave an apologetic nod. Cisco exchanged an amused glance with him. "I guess it's time to meet Major Kira." Cisco made it up the rattling metal stairs in 2 swift steps. When he arrived at the top of the staircase and approached the office entrance, he heard a voice come booming through the walls.
"You're throwing it all away! All of you! Don't ask for my opinion next time!"
Cisco winced faintly at the sound of the terminal being switched off forcefully. He pressed the buzzer by the door and it slid open almost immediately. A Bajoran woman, her short auburn hair swinging forward against her cheeks, leaned aggressively forward in the doorway. Her large eyes narrowed at him. As she straightened, her hair swung back, revealing several silver ornaments in one ear. Decidedly non-regulation. "I'm Benjamin Cisco." She caught Cisco's gaze and returned his look with one that was a clear challenge. She stepped back to allow him passage, folded her arms, and scrutinized him coldly. "I'm Major Kira. I suppose you want the office." "Well, actually, I thought I'd say hello first, and then take the office. But we could do it in any order you'd like." She swept her arm back in welcome, but Cisco's momentary amusement faded. He'd be damned if he'd tolerate any unearned hostility. He folded his arms and looked directly, unflinchingly into her eyes. "Is something bothering you, Major?" "You don't want to ask me that, Commander, because I have a bad habit of telling the truth, even when people don't want to hear it." "Perhaps I want to hear it." Her anger eased briefly, then returned. "I don't believe the Federation has any business being here." Cisco nodded thoughtfully, reminding himself once again that he was probably leaving and none of this mattered to him anyway. "The Provisional Government disagrees with you, Major." She faced him with eyes full of mistrust. "The Provisional Government and I don't agree on a lot of things, which is probably why they've sent me to this God-forsaken place. Commander, I have been fighting for Bajoran independence since I was old enough to pick up a phaser. Finally, we drive out the Cardassians, and what do our new leaders do? Call up the Federation and invite them in. What sort of independence is that?" Cisco faced her squarely. "How can you make a comparison between the two? The Cardassians were invaders who ravaged your planet and your people. The Federation is only here to..." Kira interrupted. "Help us? Yes, I know. The Cardassians said the same thing 60 years ago. Major, when I was ordered here, I requested a Bajoran national as my first officer because Unlike the Cardassians, I believe the Bajora have the right to rule their own planet. I believe my request made sense. It still does. At least to me. When an alarm sounded on a nearby comm panel, Kira whirled toward it, pressed a control, then squinted at the schematic of the station that appeared on the monitor. The Major hit another control, and the map metamorphosed into the image of a humanoid, not Bajoran. Sisko thought something was wrong with the monitor. The man's features seemed slightly blurred, unfinished, almost two-dimensional. Palms flat on the console, Kira leaned toward the image. "Odo, are you reading something at A14? The man shook his head, and it was then Sisko realized Kira's monitor was in perfect working order. It was Odo's features that were blurred. "My security array has been down for 2 hours. I'll meet you there." Kira pushed herself up and strode toward the door. "We've been having a lot of break-ins lately. No need to come along, Commander." Sisko ignored her and followed. On A14, Nog peered around the doorway and squinted tiny golden eyes into the dimness. Nog was Ferengi, very young, and at the moment, very nervous. He was ashamed to be afraid. Not that the Ferengi race approved of courage. Uncle Quark always said that courage and honor and altruism were the worst sort of stupidity, and there was nothing worse by Ferengi standards than stupidity. It was fine to be afraid, so long as it didn't cause you to get caught. Nog was terribly afraid of being stupid and disappointing Uncle Quark once again. Behind him, huddled over a safe, Jaskal used the shield damper to neutralize the force field surrounding the safe. Nog turned in time to see Jaskal's huge paws scoop a handful of valuable mineral samples out of the open safe. Jaskal was a Pikazi, twice Nog's size, huge and ponderous and hideous by any standards, Ferengi or human. Nog disliked the Pikazi, but Jaskal could easily crush Nog into pulp and had indicated that he would most certainly do so if Nog did not watch his sharp little tongue. "Hurry up, Jaskal." With agonizing deliberateness, Jaskal dropped the mineral samples into the pouch, then at last turned and joined Nog at the door. Jaskal stopped abruptly. A humanoid was coming toward them across the promenade at top speed, the strange one called Odo. "All right, just stand where you are." Nog began to tremble. Of all the beings on the station, Odo frightened him the most. Nog stopped in his tracks, but Jaskal was not so amenable. He pulled a dagger from his waistband and hurled it. The weapon whipped through the air. In the millisecond it took for the knife to approach, Odo's torso became fluid, twisted, reshaped itself to move aside out of danger's way, then sprang back. The dagger embedded itself in the wall behind the security officer. Jaskal recovered, tried to charge past Odo before he had a chance to reform, but too late. Odo grabbed him, trying to contain him, until a phaser blast scorched the wall over the fighters' heads. Odo slowly released his hold on Jaskal and turned his unfinished, flattened features toward the new Starfleet officer. "Who the hell are you?" Major Kira answered him. "Odo. This is our new Starfleet commander." Completely unimpressed, Odo studied the new human. "I don't allow weapons on the promenade. That includes phasers." Sisko drew back at this and was about to reply when an older Ferengi approached. "Nog, what's going on?" Nog repressed a bleat of despair at the sound of Uncle Quark's voice. As Quark hurried toward the Starfleet officers surrounding his young nephew, the Ferengi was in anything but a charitable mood. He had been furious to learn that the Federation intended to occupy Bajor. Quark did not mind Bajorans. Although they were an odd people who filled their minds with mystical mumbo-jumbo, at least they left him alone to do his business. And he rather liked the Cardassians. True, they were treacherous and deceitful, but these were traits Quark greatly admired. He knew how to deal with the Cardassians in their straightforward cruelty, but the Federation, especially the humans, puzzled and irritated him no end. They utterly lacked any sort of common sense, as illustrated by their bizarre, silly notions of morality and honesty, which to Quark proved their stupidity. Then there was the matter of the overeager Nog, fouling up his assignment yet again. He had sent Jaskal along as insurance, since the boy could not be trusted to complete even the simplest task that called for stealth and deviousness. The priceless mineral samples would have more than compensated for the business loss and the cost of moving his operation. Yet despite his evil humor, he approached the Starfleet officers with an innocent, simpering demeanor. Quark turned his attention to the commander.
My name is Quark. I used to run the local gambling establishment. This is my brother's boy. Surely you can see that he has only a peripheral involvement in this. We're scheduled to depart tomorrow.
Sisko turned to Odo with a nod at the young Ferengi and Jaskal. That won't be possible. Take them to the brig. With an expression of pleasure, Odo led Nog and the hulking Bakazi away as Quark stared bitterly at the human. He released a sigh of disappointment and hurried on stumpy little legs to follow the prisoners. Kira watched them go and shook her head. Quark probably sent the two of them here to steal the ore samples in the first place. She turned to study the new commander. Sisko wore a thoughtful expression. Major, there's a Ferengi legal tradition. It's called plea bargaining. I might let the boy go, but I want something in exchange from Mr. Quark. Something very important. Kira was about to ask exactly what that something was when Sisko's communicator signaled.
O'Brien to Commander Sisko.
Go ahead, O'Brien.
Sir, the Enterprise has hailed us. Captain Picard is waiting to see you.
Sisko terminated the comlink and glanced at Kira. This won't take long. Kira tilted her head intrigued as Sisko headed toward the airlock. She had noticed the very subtle change in the commander's expression at the mention of Picard's name, and read the emotion hidden there. It was one Kira had learned as a child from the Cardassians, one with which she was all too familiar. Hatred. She stood watching for a few seconds after the door closed over him. This Starfleet commander was a far more complicated person than she had expected. As Sisko made his way to the Enterprise's main observation lounge, he reminded himself he had no right to harbor any hatred toward Picard. The human was not responsible for the crimes of the Borg. And yet, by the time he pressed the chime and heard Picard's voice bid him to come in, Sisko was blinded by rage. Captain Picard sat at the end of the table, reviewing information on a screen. He smiled and rose, extending a hand. Commander, come in. Welcome to Bajor. Sisko took the proffered hand. It's been a long time, Captain. Picard tilted his lean, sculpted face and studied Sisko. Have we met before? Yes, sir. We met in battle. I was on the Saratoga at Wolf 359. Picard's face went slack. The warmth fled his eyes. Then Picard banished the specters with a blink and gathered himself. When he spoke again, his voice was cool, infinitely remote. I assume you've been briefed on the political situation on Bajor. I've come to know the Bajora. I'm one of the strongest proponents for their entry into the Federation. Ben Sisko blinked to clear the afterimage of the past, forced himself to pay attention to the captain's words. Is it going to happen? Picard rose and moved over to the observation window, deliberately putting distance between himself and Sisko. Not easily. The ruling parties are at each other's throats. Factions that were united against the Cardassians have resumed old conflicts. Picard wheeled about to glance at him sharply. Your job is to do everything short of violating the Prime Directive to make sure they do enter the Federation. Sisko gave a short, defensive nod. He did not need his job explained to him. Captain Picard took a step toward him. Starfleet has made me aware of your objections to this assignment, Commander. I would think that after 3 years at the Utopia Planitia Yards, you'd be ready for a change. Sisko thought of Jake by himself in the dark, dismal Cardassian quarters. I have a son that I'm raising alone, Captain. This is hardly the ideal environment. Picard cut him off. Unfortunately, as Starfleet officers, we do not always have the luxury of serving in an ideal environment. Sisko did not back down. I realize that, sir, and I'm investigating the possibility of returning to Earth for civilian service. Perhaps, Commander, Starfleet Command should begin to consider a replacement for you. Sisko regarded Picard with veiled hostility. That's probably a good idea. Seconds passed as the two regarded each other. The coldness in Picard's eyes faded, replaced by muted pain. Sisko knew that the captain was struggling to find the right words to broach the subject of Wolf 359. Sisko rose abruptly. In the meantime, sir, I'll do the job I've been ordered to do to the best of my ability. Thank you for the briefing. He locked eyes with Picard and waited to be dismissed. Picard studied him for a long time, clearly not wishing to end the conversation. The captain detected a faint, fleeting glimmer of anguish in Sisko's eyes, and knew that Sisko saw the same in his own. At last, Picard spoke. The Enterprise is scheduled to depart for the Lapolis system tomorrow at 0500 hours after we offload 3 runabouts. Good luck, Commander. And dismissed. As the doors closed behind Ben Sisko, Jean-Luc Picard sank back into his seat, stared distractedly for a few seconds, then lifted his gaze to the planet Bajor. Nearly 2 years had passed since his last nightmare about the experience with the Borg. In fact, he had repressed his memories so successfully that, as he had studied Ben Sisko's service record before their meeting, he had ignored his slight unease at the mention of the Saratoga. How could he have forgotten? Failed to make the connection? He had been at Wolf 359 in full consciousness as Locutus, and as Picard. In their infinite disregard for suffering, the Borg did not do him the kindness of blotting out the consciousness that was Picard. He had been forced to experience it all, to hear himself speak as Locutus at the Borg's prompting. He had been unable to control his body, his voice, unable to hide his knowledge of Starfleet's strategy and weapons. Picard had been there, and had watched in horror as first the Melbourne was destroyed, and then the Saratoga, and the Kyushu, and the Gage, and 36 other starships. How could he have forgotten the Saratoga? With a sudden chill, he recalled Sisko's mention of raising a son alone. Computer. Personal file on Benjamin Sisko, Commander. The name of his deceased wife and the cause of her death.
Jennifer Sisko, Lieutenant. Expired stardate 44002.3, aboard the Saratoga.
That will be sufficient. Picard stared grayly at the space station hub through the window. He drew a hand across his forehead. As Counselor Troy had reminded him gently 3 years ago, he could not change the facts of his mental violation by the Borg, could not bring Jennifer Sisko and all the others back from the dead. He had wrestled with some of the same demons as Sisko, had come very close to resigning his commission in an effort to retreat from past horrors. He hoped that Sisko managed to overcome those demons. Otherwise, Starfleet would lose one of her finest officers. In the security office back at the space station, Odo settled at his desk and gave his attention to his work, actively ignoring the little Ferengi, Quark, who sat fidgeting nearby. Odo disliked Ferengis. He believed very strongly in justice and honesty. It seemed a part of his being, like breathing or eating or shifting shape. He knew the Ferengi mocked such beliefs. But then, Odo also disliked everyone else, as a rule. Except Major Kira. She believed in total, blunt honesty. One always knew where one stood with Kira. He was not so sure what to make of this Sisko. He had seen how the Starfleet commander looked at him after the brief demonstration of his shape-shifting ability, and knew that Sisko wondered about his unfinished face, but hadn't asked. Odo wondered himself. 50 years ago, he had been discovered alone in an alien spacecraft near the Denorius asteroid belt. He had no memory whatsoever of his origin, of his people, but the Bajora took him as one of their own. To assimilate, he had been obliged to take on the form of a Bajoran. His true form, to which he returned each night, was that of a shapeless, gelatinous mass. He had never been able to get the humanoid appearance quite right. His features seemed flattened, two-dimensional. He knew only one thing of his people, that justice was so much a part of them as to be a racial memory. Odo could not conceive of doing any other work than security. He glanced up from his work as Sisko entered the room. Sisko said, "You wanted to see me?" Quark was on his feet, facing Sisko plaintively.
Commander, about my nephew.
Well, well, Mr. Quark. It's good to see you're still here. Have a seat, please. Quark swiveled his large rectangular head to glance at the chair behind him, and crawled back into it reluctantly.
Of course I'm still here, Commander. We're not leaving until tomorrow.
I don't think so. It's really quite simple, Quark. You're not going to leave. Quark's mouth dropped, revealing a row of wide-set pointed teeth.
Not going to leave? But we're all packed and ready to... Why would you want me to stay?
Odo gave up all pretense of working and stared up at Sisko with surprised amusement. I'm curious myself. The man is a gambler and a thief.
I am not a thief.
Odo gazed steadily at Quark. You are a thief. Quark smiled a sharp-toothed little smile that made Odo think of a hungry Bajoran sand dragon.
If I am, you haven't been able to prove it for 4 years.
Sisko did not return the smile. My officers, the Bajoran engineers, all their families depend on the shops and services of this promenade. But if people like you abandon it, this is going to become a ghost town. We need someone to step forward and say, I'm staying. I'm rebuilding. We need a community leader. And it's going to be you, Quark. Quark glanced helplessly at Odo.
Me? A community leader?
Odo settled back in his chair and grinned. But Quark failed to appreciate the humor. He spread his clawed hands and shook his head at Sisko.
How could I possibly operate my establishment under Starfleet rules of conduct?
It was a good question. Odo turned to Sisko for the answer. This is still a Bajoran station. We're not here to administrate. You run honest games, and you won't have any problems from me. Quark growled with disdain and folded his stubby arms in unconscious imitation of Sisko and fell silent. Sisko and Odo waited. At last, the Ferengi shook his head.
Commander, I've made a career out of knowing when to leave. This Bajoran provisional government is far too provisional for my taste. And when governments fall, people like me are lined up and shot.
Sisko turned to leave, stopped, paused thoughtfully in the doorway. Your poor nephew is about to spend the best years of his life in a Bajoran prison. The boy should be with his family, not in a cold jail cell. Think about it. Inside the promenade, Major Kira shoveled rubble from the walkway into a nearby receptacle. Physical labor always freed her mind to roam, and now the previous night's dream returned, as it had been fighting to all day. The rational part of her mind was convinced that none of them belonged here on the Cardassian space station. Yet when she thought with her Pa, her life force that was nourished by the prophets, she knew otherwise. She had the same dream last night as she had been having for the past several nights. The dream about Cisco. Or perhaps she was only trying to convince herself it had been about Cisco. It had been about a man, a brown-skinned human with dark eyes and hair. A man who would become very important to her people. The Bajora needed help so desperately that many were claiming to have received knowledge that one would come to help, to bring hope. The stranger predicted by the prophets. But Kira was by nature a cynic, and now she feared her people's desperation, and her own, were clouding her judgment. And yet, when she thought with her Pa, not her mind, she could sense such amazing things in Cisco's Pa that she almost believed, almost dared hope. Sometimes she felt her mind housed two different people, the mystic and the skeptic, always at odds. No wonder her planet was in such a mess. If only Kaiopaka, the spiritual leader of her people, would agree to see her. There were many things Kira wished to speak to her about. The sound of Cisco's voice made her start. She realized he was asking about the shovel, about whether such a task was appropriate for an officer. She shrugged, the dream and the Pa, once again reduced to irrelevance. Cisco was no longer the prophesied stranger, but a regulation-worshipping Starfleet type, who irritated her. She straightened, emptied the full shovel into the receptacle. Everyone else is busy repairing the primary systems. I suppose Starfleet officers aren't used to getting their hands dirty. Cisco raised an eyebrow, located a nearby shovel, picked it up, and set to work. Kira turned her face from him and pretended to be unimpressed, but she found herself trusting him enough to mention her past, a privilege she had thus far reserved for Odo. In the refugee camps, we learned to do whatever needed to be done. It didn't matter who you were. They worked silently for a time. Then Cisco turned to her. I was just talking to our good neighbor Quark. He's laying odds the Bajoran government's going to fall. Kira acknowledged with a nod. Quark knows a sure bet when he sees it. This government will be gone in a week. And so will you. So her common sense said. But hadn't her dream said otherwise? Cisco hurled a shovelful of trash. What happens to Bajor then? Civil war? Now that the Cardassians have ransacked the planet and gone, we'll start fighting in the ruins, destroying what little is left. Kira hesitated, wondering how much she should trust this stranger with. Dream or no dream. Commander, the only one who can prevent a civil war is Opaka, our spiritual leader. She's known as the Kai. Our religion is the only thing that holds my people together. If she would call for unity, they would listen. But she lives in seclusion and rarely sees anyone. Cisco considered this. Perhaps she might be more receptive if someone from the Federation asked to meet with her. Kira raised her face to him. You? Believe me, she has no more use for the Federation than I do. A shadow fell over both of them. Kira and Cisco glanced up, startled. For a moment, Ben Cisco thought he had fallen into the dream in which the omniscient Bajoran woman reached long, gentle fingers toward his cheek. But the face that hovered above him and Kira was male, older, familiar. The white-haired monk who had welcomed him to the Bajoran temple. Commander, it is time. The monk turned his robed back, trusting the human to follow. and began to purposefully stride over the promenade's wreckage. Sisko's heart beat faster. He stood, mesmerized, and for a second, no more, stared after the old monk. Odd emotions tugged at him. Emotions he had thought long buried. Emotions that had surfaced during the dream. Sisko knew he was going to talk to the Kai in order to help the Bajorans. He drew a breath, set down his shovel, and followed. Sisko and the monk transported planetside, where a bright midday sun shone on the ruins, scorched earth, dead and dying foliage, the burned-out shells of buildings. A few buildings had been spared. The monk led Sisko to one of them, a temple or monastery, Sisko guessed, from the elaborate stone carvings at the entryway. The massive stone structure's interior was dim, shadowed, illumined only by sunlight that streamed through cracks and holes in the walls. Sisko was shocked by the damage, the desecration. Windows had been smashed, interior walls knocked out, religious statuary beheaded. Yet the Cardassians had not succeeded in destroying the sense of serene contemplation that permeated the site. His guide led him past one monk who chanted mournfully amid the ruins, another who, hobbled by injuries, painstakingly patched an exterior wall. Commander Sisko. A gentle voice called his name. He turned in the direction of the sound toward the shadowed form of a woman. Sisko held his breath as a woman from his dream stepped forward, emerging from the darkness like the ghostly figures of the Saratoga's wounded. She was Bajoran, middle-aged, dressed in a brightly colored sheath, and she was injured. She supported herself on a cane as she moved toward him. Her face was badly bruised, yet it shone with an interior radiance, an inner peace that no enemy could violate. Opaka smiled faintly, gesturing with a gaze at the ruins surrounding them. I apologize for the conditions in which we greet you. Desecrating the center of our spiritual life was a way for the Cardassians to strike at the heart of the Bajoran people. Opaka led him to a contemplation area, where carved wooden benches formed a semicircle around a reflecting pool. She settled herself carefully onto one of the benches. Sisko sat beside her. She turned to him with a small smile. Your arrival has been greatly anticipated. Sisko forced himself to recover from the strange surge of emotion caused by the memory of the dream. I'm glad to hear that. If Bajor can join the Federation, it will bring stability. The Kai interrupted. I do not speak of the Federation. I speak of your arrival. Opaka reached out with long, gentle fingers and cupped one side of Sisko's face, studying him as an old woman might admire the face of a beloved grandchild. Have you explored your Pah, Commander? A Bajoran draws courage from his spiritual life. Our life force, our Pah, is replenished by the prophets. The radiance in her eyes grew as she moved her hand to Sisko's ear, and one finger slowly traced the outer rim. With a sudden move, she squeezed Sisko's earlobe. He jerked his head, startled at the intense pain. Breathe, Commander. He tried to return the conversation to political matters. Kai Opaka, if we could discuss your role in the post-Cardassian transition. Opaka ran her fingers back up the outer rim of Sisko's ear. Ironic. One who does not wish to be among us is to be the emissary. Sisko stiffened. Was his lack of interest, his desire to leave Deep Space Nine so obvious? The Kai leaned closer, studying each millimeter of his face. After a full minute of silence, she drew back. There is much to be learned from your Pah, Commander. Opaka removed a tiny control from the folds of her robe and touched it. The reflecting pool disappeared, revealing a carved stone stairwell leading downward. The pool had been a hologram. Sisko followed her down into a secret cavern, untouched by Cardassians, primitively illumined by rows of flickering candles. At the base of the stairs, Opaka turned to him, balancing her weight on the cane. You are correct that Bajor is in grave jeopardy, as grave as any time in our history. But it is the threat to our spiritual life that far outweighs any other. Perhaps, but I'm powerless unless I have a unified... Opaka cut him off. I cannot give you what you deny yourself. Look for solutions from within, Commander. At Sisko's puzzled expression, she limped across the stone floor to a carved ark. With a skillful touch, she removed the lid and stepped back so that Sisko could see. Suspended inside a force field, a shimmering double orb of pure, radiant energy floated. Opaka's face glowed green with reflected light as she stared down at it reverently. It looked like a revolving hourglass, or the mathematical symbol of infinity. Kai Opaka, what is it? Opaka had retreated from him and stood with her hand on a wall panel. The tear of the prophet. She pressed the panel. A passageway in the stone opened. She stepped inside. The passageway disappeared. Sisko turned, startled, ready to cry out her name. The cavern dimmed, then brightened with a strange greenish light. Sisko returned his gaze to the ark. The force field surrounding the glowing infinity orb had vanished. The orb itself had brightened, increased in size, started to spin. As Sisko stared in amazement, it began to spin faster, all the while growing larger, larger, until the ark could no longer contain it. And then it spun out into the room, enveloping him with a force more powerful than a cyclone. The light brightened to blinding intensity, blotting out the sight of the ark, the cavern, everything except itself. Sisko cried out and closed his eyes, but still the light increased to a level beyond physical pain. And then faded. He opened his eyes, tentatively. No shadows, no cavern. Sisko stared out at a vast expanse of white sand framing blue water, blue sky, drew in a lungful of air, and tasted brine. He stared down at himself and saw not a Starfleet uniform, but his own body, younger, leaner, wearing a bathing suit he had long ago forgotten owning. And standing there on the beach, he realized he was holding a tray of drinks in his hand. He nearly dropped it. It was lemonade. What the hell? Opaka? Two bathing suit-clad passerby shot him an odd look. Sisko fell silent, puzzled by the strange sense of familiarity. He was interrupted by the swift, certain conviction that his feet were being scalded by hot sand. Hologram or not, the sensation was all too real.
Ah! Ah! Ah!
Sisko pranced on tiptoe, eyeing the area around him. The water was too distant, but he spied a nearby beach blanket. Sisko leapt for it, inadvertently kicking sand on the supine sunbather there. Hey! The woman rolled on her side, clutching an unfastened bra to her breasts, dark brows knit tightly above a pair of sunglasses. I'm sorry, it's just that the sand was burning my... At the sight of her face, he broke off and sank slowly to his knees. He had forgotten how utterly beautiful she had been. He stretched his free hand toward her. Jennifer? The woman recoiled, uncertain, as Sisko reached gently and removed the sunglasses. Jennifer's gold-flecked brown eyes squinted at him in the harsh light, without a glimmer of recognition. Yes? I'm sorry. Did we meet last night at George's party? He struggled to his feet, glasses sloshing lemonade onto the tray. Jennifer, wait a minute. This is impossible. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? Jennifer sat up, still clutching the bathing suit top. You really should wear a cap when you're out in the sun. Jennifer, I know this place. This is Gilgo Beach. Where we met, my feet were burning. Oh, do you understand how incredible this is? No, of course you don't. Oh, Jennifer. He stared at her, wanting to touch her, to explain everything to her, to tell her how tall Jake had grown in the last 3 years. She would not understand. She would think him insane. He cast about for something, anything to say. He shoved the tray at her. Have a lemonade. She drew back, mistrustful. Sorry, I don't accept drinks from strange men on the beach. But tell me the truth. Did we really meet before? Cisco studied her. How could he tell her the truth? About their marriage, their son, her death aboard the Saratoga. So he told the truth as it had been. That first meeting on Gilgo Beach. No, we've never met. She flashed him a big, shy Jennifer smile. So, how did you know my name? George told me. Then you were at the party last night. Late. I got there late, and you were just leaving. Are you going to tell me your name? Cisco allowed himself to slip into the conversation. Ben Cisco. I just graduated from Starfleet Academy. I'm waiting for my first posting. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. A junior officer. My mother warned me to watch out for junior officers. Cisco nearly laughed. Your mother's going to adore me. It's not every day you meet the girl you're going to marry. She stopped in her tracks, surf breaking around her ankles. Do you use this routine with a lot of women? No. Never before. And never again. How about letting me cook dinner for you tonight? My father was a gourmet chef. I'll make his famous aubergine stew. A flicker of uncertainty, of mistrust, crossed her features as she stared out at the horizon. I don't know. You're supposed to say yes. Behind them, above Jennifer's head, the air shimmered, filled with greenish light. The orb. Cisco's hope became tainted with grief. He would be forced to return to the empty present. The orb began to spin, filling the beach with light. Cisco began to reach for her, but the glowing force surrounded him. Jennifer, no. Wait! Jennifer, the sand, the water, disappeared in a blaze of green, brighter and more painful to Cisco's eyes than the explosion that had torn the Saratoga apart. He felt himself enveloped by the orb's mysterious energy. Then he was swept back into the present. Once again, he found himself in the dim candlelight cavern, Opaka beside him, as they stared down at the infinity orb, nestled safely inside the ark. His legs trembled, threatened to give out beneath him. Is it some sort of holographic device? Opaka's eyes shone with reflected light. No. What you experienced barely begins to reveal its powers. This orb appeared in the skies over 1,000 years ago. 8 others have been discovered since. They have been studied and documented for a millennium. Tradition says they were sent from the Celestial Temple. What they have taught us has shaped our theology. She closed the lid of the Ark, lifted it, and gently handed it to Sisko. I entrust this to you. It will lead you to the Celestial Temple, so that you may warn the prophets. Sisko eyed her skeptically. Warn them? About what? The Cardassians took the other 8 orbs. They will stop at nothing to decipher their powers, even if it means discovering where they came from. If they do, they might destroy the Celestial Temple itself, which could mean the spiritual disintegration of Bajor. Sisko shook his head, took a step backward. You expect me to go off on some sort of quest? Opaka leaned toward him. I cannot unite my people until I know that the prophets have been forewarned. You will seek them, not for Bajor, and not for the Federation, but for yourself, for your own Pah. It is, Commander, the journey you have always been destined to take. After securing the Bajoran Ark and its mysterious contents in the science lab, Sisko stepped inside his quarters, dark, save for starlight filtering through the portholes. He groped his way through the vast outer quarters into Jake's room. He knelt beside his sleeping son. The recent sight of Jennifer, 15 years younger, brought home the resemblance between the two resoundingly. Sisko gently untangled the blanket around the boy's feet and pulled it up to Jake's shoulders, then headed for the outer room. In the archway, his comm badge signaled. Kira to Sisko. Sorry to disturb you, Commander, but there's something on the promenade you might want to see. The lift opened to the strains of raucous alien music. Sisko took one step forward, stopped, and let a grin spread slowly over his features. On the darkened promenade, one kiosk shone like a beacon. Quark's Casino. Sisko ambled down the freshly swept walkway, watching the handful of pedestrians, a few Bajora, a few fellow shopkeepers, a few spacefarers from docked vessels, hurry toward their bright destination. Inside, the casino showed little signs of Cardassian devastation. A huge spinning vertical wheel, the Ferengi version of roulette, whirled under the guidance of Quark's Ferengi pit boss.
Fortune's fate are with you today, friends. Prompt wagers, please.
Sisko elbowed his way through the smoke-filled room, past crowded gaming tables into the bar. Quark appeared on the other side and offered up a snaggle-toothed smile.
What'll you have, Commander?
Sisko placed a hand on the polished bar and glanced approvingly over his shoulder at the crowd, then back at Quark. How's the local synth ale? Quark added new wrinkles to his already generously creased nose.
You won't like it. I love the Bajorans. Such a deeply spiritual culture. But they make a dreadful ale. Don't ever trust an ale from a God-fearing people. Or a Starfleet commander who has one of your relatives in jail.
He slammed the glass on the bar in front of Sisko and wrinkled his brow ridge as he examined Sisko's face closely.
Are you sure you have no Ferengi blood?
Sisko permitted himself a small, even smile. All right, Quark. You've kept your part of the bargain. Let's talk. Ben Sisko stood beside Major Kira as they waited at the airlock gate for the medical and science officers to come aboard. Sisko strained to pick out 2 blue Starfleet uniforms amid the sea of non-fleet civilians coming through the airlock gate. Sisko knew little about the medical officer, save that his name was Julian Bashir. He was absurdly young, fresh out of Starfleet Medical, and a specialist in multi-species medicine. But Ben Sisko and Science Officer Lieutenant Jadzia Dax were very old, very dear friends. In fact, Dax had been his mentor and fatherly advisor. They had not set eyes on each other since Dax, an aging, white-haired male, left Utopia Planitia, and Sisko had no idea what he looked like now. What she looked like. Sisko caught a glimpse of Blue. Dax and Bashir headed toward them. Dr. Bashir, broad-shouldered, olive-skinned, with brown hair and warm brown eyes, looked every bit as young and green as his personnel record indicated, and then some. And Dax. Dax was definitely female, definitely beautiful, every bit as young as Bashir. She was long-limbed and tall, with a pale, delicate beauty that reminded Sisko of ancient daguerreotypes he had seen of Victorian-era women. At the sight of Sisko, she smiled a serene smile, uncannily like that of her predecessor. Sisko returned the smile awkwardly. Inwardly, he felt a strange sorrow. The outer Dax, the old man, was gone. A part of his friend had died, never to return. With Kira accompanying, Sisko strode toward the new officers. Dax fondly gazed at him with a young woman's eyes that held the accumulated wisdom of centuries. "Hello, Benjamin." Sisko allowed himself a smile at last. This is going to take some getting used to." "Don't be ridiculous. I'm still the same Dax." She had the what-the-hell directness of advanced age, but there was a bright, youthful energy in her voice. She directed her smile at Kira. "Jadzia Dax. And this is Dr. Julian Bashir." She gestured warmly toward the young man, as if the two were already fast friends. Bashir took Sisko's hand a little too eagerly, Sisko realized. This was Bashir's first assignment. Dax noticed the younger man's tension and took Bashir's arm with reassuring, maternal warmth. Sisko repressed a chuckle. Bashir obviously interpreted Dax's innocent parental concern as something entirely different. Kira's eyes narrowed slightly in disapproval. "Commander, if you'd like me to give them a tour of the station, you and Dr. Bashir go ahead. I'm afraid I have to put Lieutenant Dax right to work." Kira nodded and briskly gestured Bashir toward the promenade. Sisko waited until he and Dax reached an interior corridor, well out of Kira and Bashir's earshot before he raised the issue. "He's a little young for you, isn't he?" Dax did not quite smile, but she was clearly amused by the situation. "He's 27. I'm 28. 328, maybe. Did you tell him about that slug inside you?" Sisko could never quite bring himself to refer to the symbiont by its proper term. She looked at him fondly. "Yes, Benjamin. He knows I'm a Trill. He finds it fascinating. He's never met a joined species before. And it's we. You know that. You're speaking to both of us all the time. It's not like you're speaking just with the outer host. Symbionts have feelings, too. I wonder if he'd have been as fascinated if you still looked the same way you did the last time I saw you." "Perhaps not. I don't really know this new host. I miss Curzon." Dax laid a hand on Sisko's arm. "I know. I miss him too, Benjamin. If it makes you feel any better, a part of him, all his memories, will always be with me." They stepped aboard the lift and rode up in silence. In the laboratory, Sisko showed Dax the infinity-shaped orb, now freed from its arc and suspended behind a force field. She drew in a breath, her face illumined by childlike awe and reflected greenish light. "Benjamin, it's beautiful. Have you had a chance to test its properties?" He shifted uneasily, unable to bring himself to speak so soon of Jennifer and Gilgo Beach. "I've been waiting for my science officer. Your field, not mine. We do have one advantage. The Bajoran monks have been studying these things for 10,000 years. I've had our computers set up to interface with their historical databanks." She nodded approvingly, and he turned to go. She called after him. "I was happy when I heard you'd accepted this assignment. I'd been worried about you. The words tugged at his emotions. Curzon had been worried about Sisko's stalled career, had nagged him constantly about transferring off Planitia. Sisko smiled sadly. It's good to see you too, old man. And he left before Dax could see the grief gathering in his eyes. Dax had faith Benjamin would quickly become accustomed to this new host, too. She rose and moved over to the nearby console. Computer, create a chronological database for all historical references to the orbs, plus all reports of any unexplained phenomena in Bajoran space. Initializing database. Requested function will require 2 hours to complete. In the commander's office, Ben Sisko surreptitiously watched a recorded transmission from Vesteris University. Sisko had made a half-hearted application less than a week ago. Now he watched the screen with nothing less than amazement. The Chancellor himself had delivered the news. It's not every day we have the chance to recruit someone with your experience, Ben. We hope you'll consider our offer seriously. I look forward to getting your response. Sisko stared dully at the screen. He should have been delighted, not oddly disappointed. Instead, he found himself thinking of Opaka and the Infinity Orb. He started as his comm badge signaled. Kira to Commander Sisko. The Cardassian warship has just entered Bajoran space. Sisko rose and stepped out onto his balcony and looked down on his command. On the screen, a huge Cardassian warship, dark and grim, glided toward the station. O'Brien, who was standing at the engineering station, turned to Sisko. Message coming in from their commander, Gul Dukat, requesting permission to come aboard, to greet us. Kira's eyes narrowed with recognition. Dukat used to be the Cardassian prefect of Bajor. O'Brien looked at his commander. Surely a coincidence that the Enterprise just left. Sisko glanced at his 2 officers. He had never met a Cardassian, but judging by the looks on Kira and O'Brien's faces, he hadn't missed out on much. Mr. O'Brien, tell Gul Dukat I look forward to meeting him. Not much later, Gul Dukat entered Sisko's office without knocking. His appearance was anything but pleasant, a collection of ridged, mottled flesh disappearing inside a black uniform that looked armor-brittle, like the hard outer shell of a dark, colorless insect. Dukat smiled, showing a narrow strip of teeth. He sat down without waiting for an invitation. Good day, Commander. Excuse my presumption, but this was my office only 2 weeks ago. Sisko rose, nodded, but did not smile. Gul Dukat, drop by any time you're feeling homesick. Dukat acknowledged Sisko with a humorless smile. You are very gracious. And allow me to assure you that we only want to be helpful in this difficult transition. You are far from the Federation fleet, alone in this remote outpost with poor defense systems. Your Cardassian neighbors will be quick to respond to any problems you might have. Sisko recognized the thinly veiled threat. With the Enterprise gone, the Cardassians could easily cause heavy damage to the station and leave the area long before Federation help could arrive. The Cardassian tilted his head quizzically. So, what did you think of Kai Opaka? I understand you brought back one of the orbs. We thought we had them all. Perhaps we could have an exchange of information. Pool our resources. Dukat's abrupt change of subject caught Sisko off guard. I don't know anything about an orb. Dukat smiled in disbelief. We will be in close proximity, should you wish to reconsider my suggestion. In the meantime, I assume you have no objection to my men enjoying the hospitality of the promenade? He bowed stiffly from the shoulders and left. Sisko sank into his chair with a sigh. Some instinct had said that Dukat must not get the orb no matter what the cost. But Sisko's rational mind knew that that cost might be the lives of those on the station. Was he letting Opaka's mysticism lead him into making a deadly mistake? He rose and headed to see Dax. When he reached the lab and entered, he saw Dax frowning at a monitor. It was strange to see his old friend suddenly metamorphosed into such a beautiful young woman. Even so, he was glad to have her here. Dax spoke to him without taking her gaze off the screen. "Benjamin, what do you know about the Denorius asteroid belt?" Sisko stopped in his tracks and blinked. "Your basic navigational hazard. Nobody gets anywhere near it unless they have to." Dax nodded and scanned the screen. In the latter part of the 22nd century, a ship carrying Kai Toluno was disabled for several days in the Denorius belt, where he claims to have had a vision. Sisko walked up behind her to put a hand on the back of her chair and stared over her shoulder at the data scrolling by on the monitor. Let me guess. He saw the celestial temple of the prophets. Not quite. But he did say the heavens opened up and nearly swallowed his ship. Sisko sighed. At the moment, his mystical encounter with Opaka and the orb seemed meaningless, distant, in the face of Gul Dukat's very real threat. "Dax, are we reduced to chasing metaphors to solve this?" She swiveled in the chair and rose, smiling at him. As a matter of fact, Kai Toluno was not a man prone to exaggeration. Sisko raised a brow, repressed a smile. "I suppose you knew him." "Just an acquaintance. I was a diplomatic apprentice at the time." Sisko interrupted. "You really think his vision has anything to do with this?" "Perhaps. I've been able to confirm that at least 5 of the orbs were found in the Denorius belt. There have also been 23 navigational reports over the years of unusually severe neutrino disturbances in the same area. And 32 years ago, a vessel of unknown origin appeared there, carrying a new life form, an infant shapeshifter." Sisko turned his head sharply to look at her. "A shapeshifter? There's a shapeshifter right here on DS9, the security officer." Dax took in this information thoughtfully. "I've been trying to correlate all these reports in one analysis grid." She pressed another control. Sisko leaned forward to study the 3-dimensional grid that appeared on the screen, brightly delineating a small area of space near the station. Dax nearly smiled. "Our celestial temple?" Sisko rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It's worth a look. I just spoke with Gul Dukat. He's made it very clear he's keeping an eye on us. So, somehow, we need to get by the Cardassians undetected." Dax smiled up at him. "What were you just saying about that security officer?" O'Brien simply did not trust Major Kira. Her attitude toward authority in Starfleet was often openly contemptuous. But she surprised him. She listened to Sisko's orders without question and led her small contingent to Quarks with the cool competence of a born commander. O'Brien finally began to understand. This was something she wanted to do, because it might help her people. Which was just as well, because by the time they arrived at the casino, the place was packed with dark-uniformed Cardies. A roar came from one of the tables, followed by raucous laughter. The Cardassians were winning. Kira strode into the center of them, filched a mug from one of them, too inebriated to protest, and banged it on the bar. "Can we have your attention, please? This establishment is being closed." O'Brien tensed, reached for the phaser that was not there, and once again cursed Odo's arbitrary rule against phasers on the promenade. Quark pushed his way toward her, a small bundle of fury, and swiped at the air in front of her with a clawed hand.
What do you mean? You can't do this!
O'Brien stepped forward at his cue and delivered his line smoothly. If you have a problem, sir, you'll have to take it up with Commander Sisko. Quark wheeled on him, trembling with rage.
I intend to. This is outrageous.
He smoothed his tone and addressed the crowd.
My apologies, friends. A minor misunderstanding that will be rectified shortly.
He turned to his pit boss.
Give them something to put their winnings in.
The boss nodded. A little too knowingly? O'Brien worried, but the Cardis seemed to be buying it. They began scooping up winnings and stuffing gold into the knapsack. Quite a lot of gold. One of them hoisted it with difficulty. It was bound to be very heavy. Inside the knapsack, Odo fought panic. The weight of the gold pressed down on him, making breathing seem difficult. He relaxed into a near-mindless state by focusing instead on the sounds. The ring of 3 pairs of boots against a metal deck. The drone of self-satisfied, drunken voices speaking Cardassian. The panic eased. Odo tuned in completely, listening for the proper moment to make his transition. They were inside the ship now. Footsteps stopped. The sound of a small door swinging on a hinge. A locker. They had put the knapsack inside. Odo waited for the footsteps to fade entirely, then made the change. Oozing out from underneath the gold, between the cracks of the locker, down the bulkhead to the deck. He drew a deep, unimpeded breath, then hurried down the corridor to his destination, the Cardassian warship's computer center. At his engineering control station in Ops, O'Brien studied the readout with a sense of victory and lifted his face toward Major Kira with something very close to a smile. Lieutenant, scanners are picking up fluctuations in the Cardassians' energy distribution net. Kira checked her panels and reacted with frank delight. Their computer is crashing. Shields and sensors are down. On the landing pad of the station's inner ring, Sisko and Dax now sat in the runabout's cockpit. It was a small vessel, sturdy, scarcely larger than an escape pod. Kira's voice filtered through the comm grid on the runabout's control panel. Commander, we're in business. Odo has completed his mission. Now's the time to get going. Sisko ignored the fact that his heart had begun to beat faster. Beginning launch sequence. Beside him, Dax worked navigation with comm efficiency. O'Brien's voice was on the comm. Cleared for departure. Dax swiveled toward him. Course laid in. Sisko drew a breath as the runabout rose and sailed away from the station, into his future. Back at the station, Kira looked down at the flashing signal on her master control panel and called over to O'Brien. Odo's reached the transport site. O'Brien answered, trying to lock on. O'Brien knew if Odo didn't make his exit in time to avoid detection, the entire operation would be in jeopardy. He pressed the control that should have activated energization immediately. But nothing happened. The damnable Cardi technology refused to cooperate. Swiftly, he pressed another control to initiate an emergency backup sequence. Nothing. He put the damn thing on manual and tried to program the sequence in himself. Nothing. Damn it! O'Brien gave the panel a swift, solid kick. The beam activated. The pad began to shimmer, and Odo fully materialized. Major Kira grinned at the shapeshifter. Nice work, Constable. The runabout glided at impulse into the Denorius. Cisco glanced up at viewscreen, taking in the sight of stars, glittering behind swirls of blue dust. On Dax's monitor, a grid of Denorius blinked at them, showing their location on the perimeter. Approaching grid perimeter, slowing to 1/4 impulse. Dax leaned forward to check a sensor reading and drew back in surprise. Computer, give me visual at bearing 23, mark 217, range 3,100 kilometers. The display wavered and changed to the requested sector. Dax frowned slightly at the data on the monitor. Sensors are picking up unusually high proton counts. Cisco, without pausing to think, set a new course to those coordinates, heading for the center of the disturbance. O'Brien's voice crackled over the comm.
Lieutenant, in that asteroid belt, you could be looking at chondrite echoes.
Dax's frown grew deeper as she worked her panel with both hands. I don't think so. The neutrino disturbances are getting stronger as we approach the coordinates. Cisco checked his own readouts. Whatever it is, it's not affecting our systems. Dax's eyes widened with scientific awe. All external wave intensities are increasing exponentially, but... Checking. Confirmed. There is no corresponding increase inside the cabin. How is that The runabout lurched. Cisco threw up his hand to shield his eyes from the dazzling burst of light. Cisco blinked. The readout screens were dark. He glanced over at Dax, who was fidgeting with the comm controls. Sensors aren't functioning. He was going to ask her what had happened, but it was clear enough from her expression that she knew no more than he. She spoke again, in a voice that once again reminded him of old Curzon. We've lost all contact with the station. Cisco stared down at the useless, darkened sensor screens and vainly tried to revive the controls. The view screen revealed no stars, only flickering rainbow light. He called to Dax over the sounds of the ship shuddering. Are your navigational readings going crazy? Dax gave him a slow, deliberate nod. I'll recalibrate them when I have a moment. The runabout reeled again. Cisco gritted his teeth and clutched his panel, managing to stay in his seat. Slowly, easily, the craft righted herself. Screens flickered. The main viewer dimmed, then brightened, this time with stars. But the configuration was wrong. This was not the Denorius belt. He swiveled toward Dax. Can you get a fix on our coordinates? There's a star just under 5 light years away. No M-class planets. Computer, identify closest star system. Idran, a ternary system consisting of a central supergiant and twin O-type companions. Dax had the gleam of scientific revelation in her eye. Computer, basis of identification. Identification of Idran is based on the hydrogen alpha spectral analysis conducted in the 22nd century by the Quadros 1 probe of the Gamma Quadrant. Cisco's lower jaw dropped. The Gamma Quadrant? 70,000 light years from Bajor. I'd say we just found our way into a wormhole. Dax's expression was one of dawning wonder. It's not like any wormhole I've ever seen. There were none of the usual resonance waves. They stared at the stars for a few seconds, until Cisco wondered aloud, do you think this is how the orbs found their way into the Bajoran system? Not an unreasonable hypothesis. If it's true, that would mean this has been here for at least 1,000 years. We might have just discovered the first stable wormhole known to exist. She finally smiled. You may want to wait until we get safely back before you put your name in the history books, Benjamin. Our names, old man, our names. Bring us about, Lieutenant. As Dax brought the vessel around and they ventured again into the wormhole, Cisco relaxed enough to appreciate the beauty of the flashing prismatic colors around them. This is even better than finding the Celestial Temple. Think about it. A stable wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant in Bajorn space is going to solve a lot more of their problems than the Kai ever could. Expeditions from countless worlds will be coming through here now. They'll give Bajor an economic base, a way to rebuild, a perfect capstone. Dax frowned suddenly. What are you talking about, Benjamin? I'll probably be leaving soon. Going back to Earth. To do what? The University at Vesteris thinks I might have something to offer their astronautics program. A professor? The ship began to shudder, and Dax turned sadly from him and worked her controls. The runabout's vibrations eased. Dax said, I'm modifying the flight program to compensate for the spatial discontinuities. We should have a smoother ride this time. Cisco frowned, holding perfectly still, trying to tune into his pilot's instinct. Did you reduce impulse power? We're losing velocity. She checked her panels. Power output is still constant. Cisco checked the control panel readout. We're down to 120 kph. Computer, identify cause of deceleration. Cause unknown. The answer was hardly reassuring. Dax looked at her screen. Velocity is still falling. Cisco stared back at his screen, incredulous. Engine output is running 70% above normal. Warning. Impulse system overload. Auto shutdown in 12 seconds. Cisco gave up the struggle. No point in damaging the engines. He reached out to press a toggle. Disengaging engines. I'm picking up an atmosphere, Benjamin. Inside a wormhole? She glanced back at her screen. Capable of supporting life. She and Cisco were suddenly thrown forward in their chair by the impact. The runabout shuddered once, briefly, then grew still. Dax checked her instruments. We've landed. On what? For some curious reason, he remembered the dream he'd had the night before he'd arrived at the station, and the sense of mystery, the sense of coming home. Together, he and Dax stepped out of the tiny craft. Out of habit and instinct, Cisco drew his phaser and set it on stun. The desert landscape was unfamiliar, brutal, anything but welcoming. A bleak expanse of rock cliffs stretched to the horizon, illumined by flashes from electrical storms in the dark, forbidding sky. Cisco narrowed his eyes against the stinging wind. Dax followed, tricorder in hand. She took in the surroundings with an appreciative smile. It's beautiful. He glanced out at the dead horizon and back at Dax with a raised brow. You have a strange eye for beauty. It can't beat the sulfuric mine pits of Hades IV. How can you say that? The colors, all the flora. He turned to her. I don't see any flora, Dax. She turned her head to study her surroundings. We're standing in a garden. Cisco shook his head. We're standing on a rock face. Do you see the storms? She shot him an uneasy look. Clear as a summer's day. Roughly 7 meters away, a ball of brilliant green light, identical in appearance to the orb that now rested in DS9's laboratory, sailed toward them through the sky. The orb stopped, hesitated a few meters from them, then began emitting a single green beam of light, scanning Cisco from head to foot. Dax, in turn, scanned the beam with her tricorder. Low-level ionic pattern. It's probing us. Cisco relaxed as the beam left him and turned its attentions on Dax. Someone's idea of shaking hands, maybe. When the scan was finished, Sisko stepped forward to speak. "I am Commander Benjamin Sisko of the United Federation of Planets." One moment he was standing, and the next moment he was thrown backwards, as if someone had lifted the ground beneath his feet and shaken it like a carpet. Surrounding him was a stormy rock landscape. But as he looked at Dax, he saw the garden, deep green foliage and bright flowers collapsing around her into a spinning ball of green light. He shouted to her, but the winds around him increased, swallowing his words. Light surrounded him, engulfing him until nothing remained but white light and furious storms. He struggled, felt himself sink into the light as if he were drowning in quicksand. Nearby, the green light coalesced into an orb, completely enveloping Dax. It sped into the dark, treacherous sky, carrying her with it. Sisko shouted again, lunged forward, only to be pulled under and utterly consumed by the light. At Ops, O'Brien studied his readouts and did his best not to react to the fact that the vessel bearing his new captain had just disappeared. It had seemed as if space had simply opened up, developed a rip, and the runabout had sailed right into it and had been swallowed alive. Kira crossed over to his station, bent over his shoulder, and looked at the monitor as if she just might throttle it. What the hell is happening out there? Another neutrino disruption. Kira nodded. Scanners are picking up an object near their last known coordinates. It isn't the runabout, or a starship. O'Brien checked his sensors and jerked his head up at the information. "Major, there's something inside it. Some kind of life form. It's human." Kira took a moment to consider the consequences. "Are the Cardassian sensors picking it up?" O'Brien gave a nod. "They should be back online by now. We have to assume they know everything we know." Kira made her decision. "Yellow alert. Secure ops. Beam it aboard, Mr. O'Brien, but put it in a level 1 security field." "Aye, sir. Locking on." O'Brien pressed the controls and was surprised and gratified when they responded immediately. What appeared on the transporter pad surprised him even more. A shimmering green ball of light materialized. It hovered for a millisecond after the transporter beam dimmed, then spun away with blinding speed, revealing a slightly dazed-looking, but unharmed, Lieutenant Dax. White light. The void. It was not death, not life, as Sisko knew it. A different place altogether. His body seemed to have disappeared. Everything had disappeared. The hellish landscape, the storms, the green orb, the runabout, Dax, himself. All of it gone. Sisko waited, existing. And then a waterfall of images cascading over him all at once. Jennifer on Gilgo Beach. She turned up toward him, frowning at the interruption. On the Saratoga, staring down at his own helpless hands. Suddenly wearing a catcher's mitt, feeling the solid, satisfying slap of a baseball right in the center. Picard's face gone slack. In those eyes, the smoldering ghosts of the Saratoga. The sting of smoke in his lungs, his eyes, the deck ripped asunder, flames shooting up from the level below. "Who are you?" Sisko was uncertain whether the words issued from his voice or mind. There was silence. Then another tide of emotion and memory overwhelmed him. The feel of Jennifer's lips soft against his, Opaka's gentle fingertips against his face, Jake's shy Jennifer grin, fishing pole in his hand. "Who are you?" Sisko drew in a lungful of air and tasted sea. He stared down at his bare feet and saw that he stood on the edge of a beach blanket. Jennifer rolled onto her side, dark brows knit tightly above a pair of sunglasses. She spoke. It is corporeal, a physical entity. Cisco saw Jennifer and knew it was not Jennifer. What did you say? Reality shifted so suddenly he reeled. In the Enterprise observation lounge, Picard smiled, rose, extended a hand. It is responding to visual and auditory stimuli. Linguistic communication. Cisco felt a surge of hope. Yes, linguistic communication. Are you capable of communicating with me? Reality reeled again. Opaka cupped his face in her hand. Why do you harm us? Cisco's pulse quickened with excitement at the realization that he had established direct communication at last. I don't wish to harm anyone. On the main bridge view screen of the Saratoga, Locutus spoke in Picard's voice, but lifeless, grating, mechanical.
You deceive us.
No. I'm telling you the truth. Cisco turned, distracted to find himself surrounded by the Saratoga's crew. Rannoch, Tamamota, Captain Storrell. Yet, knowing all of them were aliens. The holodeck fishing pond, Jake, swinging his legs above the water, turning to Cisco with a frankly curious gaze. What are you? The Jake alien tilted his head, puzzled. Earth? Cisco gestured at their surroundings. This is what my planet looks like. The Jake alien looked around, clearly unable to appreciate what he was seeing. Cisco tried again. You and I are very different species. It will take time for us to understand one another. The Jake alien looked bewildered. Time. What is this time? At the situation table at the center of ops, Odo listened with Kira, O'Brien, and Bashir to Lieutenant Dax's explanation of what she and Commander Cisco had encountered. As head of station security, Odo's presence was not required at such a briefing, but he had a very good personal reason for paying careful attention to what Dax had to say. He was not the only one excited by Dax's report of a stable wormhole. Kira also leaned forward with keen interest. Navigational sensors will be useless. We won't be able to retrace the route to Benjamin's location. O'Brien nodded. Now that we know it's a wormhole, we can use a field density compensator. Dax hesitated. It's not an ordinary wormhole. My analysis suggests it isn't even a natural phenomenon. Odo stiffened at this news. Was it possible that his own people were somehow involved? Bashir marveled. Not natural? You mean it was constructed? Dax gave a single, graceful nod. It's very possible that whoever made the orbs also created this wormhole. A look of amazement crossed Kira's face, and she murmured to herself, "The Celestial Temple." She straightened defensively when Odo shot her a curious glance. O'Brien interrupted. "The Cardassians are leaving their position, on a course toward the Denorius Belt." Kira stood, frowning. "What would it take to move this station to the mouth of the wormhole?" O'Brien's jaw dropped open at the concept. "This isn't a starship, Major. We've got 6 working thrusters to power us, and that's it. A 160 million kilometer trip would take 2 months. We've got to be there tomorrow." O'Brien shook his head. "Well, that's not possible, sir. Find me a Class 6 starship to tow us." Kira was implacable. "Find another way. That wormhole might just reshape the future of this entire quadrant. The Bajorans have to stake a claim to it. She slapped the table with her palm, paced a few steps out of sheer frustration, and wheeled to face O'Brien again. And I have to admit, that claim will be a lot stronger if there's a Federation presence there to back it up. Dax watched the entire exchange with utter calm, as if Benjamin's life and the future of the Bajora were not at stake. Couldn't you modify the subspace field output of the deflector generators just enough to create a low-level field around the station? O'Brien frowned at her, but his expression quickly metamorphosed into one of dawning revelation. So we could lower the inertial mass? Dax nodded, pleased. If you could make the station lighter, those 6 thrusters would be all the power we would need. Might just work, Lieutenant, but this whole station could break apart like an egg if it doesn't. Dax sighed in acknowledgement. Even if it does work, we're going to need help from Starfleet once we get there. O'Brien turned to Dax. The Enterprise is still the nearest starship. It would take them 2 days to get here. Dax gave him a look that said, "What other choice do we have?" Ensign O'Brien, advise Starfleet that we will require their assistance. O'Brien nodded and turned his attention to his panel. Kira started for the corridor, looking over one shoulder at the still-seated group. You have ops, Mr. O'Brien. I'm leading the rescue mission. Lieutenant Dax, you're with me. You too, Doc. Time to be a hero. Unbidden, Odo followed, catching up to them. Kira noticed, and began a gentler-than-usual rebuke. Constable. He did not let her finish. This is a security matter. I'm in charge of security. Kira stopped at the turbolift, pressed a control, folded her arms. Security here on the station. I can't justify taking you into this wormhole. We don't know what we're dealing with in there. It could be hostile. Odo sensed her hesitation and persisted. Major, I was found in the Denorius Belt. I don't know where I came from. No idea if there are any others like me. All my life, I've been forced to pass myself off as one of you, always wondering who I really am. The answers to a lot of my questions may be somewhere on the other side of that wormhole. The doors parted as the lift arrived. Odo walked past Kira into the waiting lift. You coming? He saw her dark eyes narrow, saw the muscle in her jaw twitch once, twice. She glanced at Dax, at Bashir, clearly considering that Odo's insubordination made her look bad in front of the other officers. And then she gave a small, barely audible sigh of resignation, and her face relaxed. Odo smiled as Kira stepped onto the turbolift without another word. Sisko waited in pure, formless existence for the aliens to contact him again. After the mention of time to the Jake alien, he had sensed their confused retreat. They appeared again in the form of Jean-Luc Picard, standing in the Enterprise observation lounge, the planet Bajor serving as backdrop behind him. Picard gazed at him mistrustfully. The creature must be destroyed before it destroys us. The scene shifted to the main view screen on the Saratoga, the cutis, flesh and metal. It is malevolent. Once again, the Enterprise observation lounge, with Deep Space Nine now appearing in the observation window, Picard spoke with a voice grown infinitely cool and remote. It must be destroyed. Sisko started at the sight of his body in his Starfleet uniform, at the realization that he was physically sitting in the observation lounge in the seat beside Picard's. He touched the chair, felt fabric beneath his fingers. He leaned forward, desperate to convince the alien Picard of his sincerity. I'm not your enemy. I've been sent here by people you contacted with your devices, your orbs. Picard, with cold disbelief, rose, clasped his hands behind him, and walked over to the observation window as if eager to put distance between himself and the human. We seek contact with other life forms, not corporeal creatures who would annihilate us. Sisko stood, breaking the pattern of the past. I have not come to annihilate anyone. Suddenly, around him, 100 flames were shining in the dark stone chamber beneath the monastery. Kai Opaka tenderly withdrew her hand from Sisko's cheek. Can you not see the damage you have already done? If I have caused you any harm, I deeply regret it. I am here only to find those who sent the orbs. Opaka considered this, her black pupils reflecting 1,000 flickering lights. For what purpose? To establish peaceful relations, as we have with hundreds of other species. She shrank from him mistrustfully. Hundreds of other corporeal species? But before he could answer, Sisko was again on the Saratoga's bridge, sitting in the chair next to Captain Storrell. Ensign Tamamoto swiveled from her navigation console to face him accusingly. This creature will lead them here. They will annihilate us. Sisko looked for help from Captain Storrell. The Vulcan regarded him calmly, then turned to face the main view screen as the image of Locutus opened its mouth. 1,000,000 echoing voices spoke as one. Destroy it now. Sisko propelled himself from his chair toward the view screen, shouting at the Borg-human hybrid. My species respects life above all else. Can you say the same? If you are going to destroy me, at least know who it is you destroy. Storrell faced him calmly and lifted a brow in mild annoyance. Sisko felt a glimmer of pain at the familiar gesture. We know all that we need to know. You endanger our domain. Sisko turned toward his dead shipmates. I do not understand the threat I bring to you. But I am not your enemy. Allow me to prove it. Rannoch swiveled from his console. Prove it? Sisko hesitated. It can be argued that a human is ultimately the sum of his experiences. Jake, squinting in the sun, turned his attention away from his fishing pole. Experiences? What is this? Memories, events from my past, like this one. The alien Jake scrunched his forehead and broke the surface of the blue pond with one dangling toe, watching as the ripples spread outward into infinity. Past? Jake blinked at him, absolutely stymied. What came before now is no different than what is now, or what is to come. It's one's existence. Sisko drew in a breath of amazement as he crouched beside the child, suddenly understanding. Then, for you, there is no linear time. Stretched out on the blanket, Jennifer lowered her sunglasses with a slender finger and stared at him over the rim. Linear time? What is this? Sisko set down the tray of lemonades in the sand and leaned toward her. My species lives in one point in time, and once we move beyond that point, it becomes the past, the future. All that is still to come does not exist yet for us. That is the nature of a linear existence, and if you examine it more closely, you will see that you do not need to fear me. He looked into those familiar brown eyes, flecked with gold, and saw through them for an instant to the alien presence beneath, to the hesitation, the fear. And Sisko waited. O'Brien was left at ops with a handful of Bajoran techs, far too much recalcitrant Cardi technology, and a good deal of worry about whether they could get DS9 moving out of orbit and heading towards a wormhole.
Damn it. Computer, analyze subspace field integrity.
Power frequency imbalance is preventing field closure.
Add reactor 3 to the power grid.
O'Brien hurried to his monitor and watched a schematic of the station as the warp field almost enclosed it, then failed, dissolving. Partial field established.
Partial field. Is the station's inertial mass low enough to break orbit?
Procedure is not recommended at this time. O'Brien felt a muscle in his jaw begin to twitch.
Damn it. I didn't ask for an opinion. Just tell me whether or not we can get enough thrust with only a partial field established.
Affirmative.
All right. Initiate transit mode. 3-axis stabilization. Engage.
He checked his monitor and saw from the schematic that the thrusters were indeed firing. The deck beneath his feet began to vibrate. The stars in the overhead observation windows began to shift slowly. They were moving, breaking orbit. O'Brien moved to his monitors and began checking readouts. Warning. Field integrity declining. Station is now beyond safe shutdown velocity. Subspace field collapse in 60 seconds. The deck rocked slightly beneath O'Brien's feet. He scanned the readouts, searching for an answer. He lifted his face and shouted to the Bajoran techs.
Does anyone here know if the inertial dampers can feed the deflectors?
They returned blank stares. O'Brien glanced back down at his console.
Good time to find out. Computer, transfer energy from the inertial dampers to reinforce the subspace field.
He squinted at the monitor. Nothing was happening. Procedure is not recommended. Unable to comply. Warning. Subspace field collapse in 30 seconds. He wasted no more time on anger, but called over to the techs.
I'm going to transfer it manually. On my mark. Redirect the flow to the deflectors.
The Bajorans nodded.
Now!
O'Brien struggled with insane speed to work a dozen different controls. Nearby, the Bajoran techs worked with the same feverishness. The lights flickered, dimmed. O'Brien looked up at the schematic on his monitor and saw the field leap completely into place around the station. The whine ceased. The vibrations disappeared as the lights brightened again. Field energy now within flight tolerances. O'Brien released his breath explosively and smiled weakly over at the Bajoran techs, then returned his attention to his readouts.
Computer, you and I have to have a little talk.
Kira and Dax piloted the runabout. Odo sat behind the Major and across from Bashir, who gazed out of the observation window with the frank curiosity of a child. They rode together in tense silence, except for Dax. It was she who first spoke, peering down at her view screen. The Cardassian warship is in visual range. The stars on the overhead screen wavered, shifted to a view of the grim, giant vessel. Kira checked her instruments. They're going right to the wormhole. She drummed her fingers on the console, thinking. Question is whether or not they decide to believe us. But that's up to them. Kira pressed a control on the comm panel. This is the Federation ship Yangtze Kian, Major Kira Nerys in command. The image of Gul Dukat, in all his treacherous glory, appeared on the screen. He looked infinitely impatient at the concept of communicating with the Bajoran underling. Kira folded her arms as if trying to hold in her hatred. Gul Dukat.
We know you're headed for the wormhole. I strongly suggest you do not proceed. We encountered a hostile life form inside. Commander Sisko has already been captured. We're about to attempt a rescue. Gul Dukat tilted his head as he listened. Perhaps they would be less hostile to Cardassians than humans. Odo interrupted with weary impatience. Dukat, you know I won't lie to you. And I know you probably won't listen to me, but these people are trying to save you from a lot of trouble. Dukat shook his head. Thank you for your concern. I suppose you'd also tell me these are not the life forms that sent the orbs, or that your commander Sisko is not negotiating for their technology. I think we'll see for ourselves. The view screen went black, then cleared to show stars. The Cardassian warship proceeded through the Denorius belt and disappeared as it entered the wormhole. Sisko sensed a ripple in the void, a stirring, and knew instinctively the aliens approached again. He was in Zegi Park again, in a younger, leaner body, sitting on a picnic blanket Jennifer had spread on the grass. It was a warm, cloudless day with an intensely blue sky and a cool breeze. The wind carried the reckless laughter of children. Jennifer lay cradled in his arms, breathing and warm and alive. She stirred in his arms, pointed to herself. Jennifer. The illusion was shattered. He pulled away from her, withdrew his arms quickly. Yes, that was her name. The alien with Jennifer's voice looked at him. She is part of your existence. Sisko looked away, out at the sunny horizon. She is part of my past. She's no longer alive. The alien considered this. Sisko half turned and saw the confusion on her face. He sighed. I lost her some time ago. Lost? What is this? He turned to gaze on her directly. Nothing but honest curiosity in her huge, dark eyes. In a linear existence, we can't go back to the past to get something we left behind. So it's lost. She drew back in disbelief. It is inconceivable that any species could exist in such a manner. Oh, you are deceiving us. He stood, looking out at the children playing soccer in the distance. No, this is the truth. This day, this park, it was almost 15 years ago. It was a very important day to me. A day that shaped every day that followed. That is the essence of a linear existence. Each day affects the next. The scene changed. He was on the Saratoga. The corridors were lined with flame and shrouded in smoke. Sisko could not go down that corridor. Could not do what was expected of him, not this time. Behind him, the alien spoke. But this is your existence. Sisko drew a hand across his perspiring brow. Yes, but it is difficult to return here. More difficult than any other memory. This was the day I lost Jennifer. Then why do you exist here? Uncomprehending, he stared at her, overwhelmed by fear, grief, confusion. He pushed himself away from the bulkhead, opened his mouth to plead for help and escape. The words died in his throat. Flames froze in mid-leap, fleeing survivors in mid-stride. Smoke hung, motionless, suspended in the air. Jennifer stood, breathless, lifeless. The memory's sudden suspension seemed desperately wrong. He watched as the burning corridor and those within began to melt away. A shrill, piercing whine filled Sisko's skull. He raised his hands to his ears to blot it out. Ducat relaxed back in his chair and enjoyed the flickering circus of light surrounding the warship with a sense of utter victory. The Empire would name this wormhole after him, would find a way to suitably reward him. The light cleared and gave way to stars. Gul Dukat, we have reached the Gamma Quadrant. Very good. Come about and prepare to re-enter the wormhole. He watched the stars shift slowly as the great vessel turned 180 degrees to face the wormhole once again, its entrance still illumined with soft, flickering rainbow light. Then before him, the wormhole shattered into 1,000,000 points of light and was gone. Aboard the runabout, O'Brien's voice filtered through the comm panel. Are you sure it collapsed? It could have withdrawn deeper into subspace. Dax clearly heard the desperation all of them felt. She worked swiftly to take sensor readings of the area. We haven't found any indication of that, but we're still checking. Should I turn the station around and go back? Major Kira leaned forward over the control panel, her short dark hair falling forward against her cheek, her eyes burning with intensity. She was struggling to suppress the feelings of despair over the loss of Benjamin, and more. The wormhole meant the economic salvation of her people. What's your position? I'll be at your coordinates in less than 3 hours. Uncertainty flickered in Kira's dark eyes for a millisecond, then was replaced by utter determination. Maintain your course. We'll rendezvous here. By then, our scan should be complete. None of them wanted to yield to hopelessness, to give up on Benjamin, on the wormhole, this soon. O'Brien's voice revealed his relief. Aye, sir. By the way, we've been getting queries from the Cardassians since their ship disappeared from the sensor field. Odo spoke, his tone colorless, humorless. They'll see Gul Dukat in about 60 or 70 years if he starts back right away. Sisko lingered in the void. Despite the horror of returning to the scene of dying Saratoga, Sisko felt a deep sense of loneliness at the alien's disappearance. Talk to me. Are you still there? Jennifer appeared, clad again in bathing suit and sunglasses. She approached solemnly. More if you're kind. He struggled to understand. Another ship? In the wormhole? She tipped the sunglasses down with a finger and stared over the rim. Wormhole? What is this? It is how we describe the kind of passage that brought me here. Jennifer vanished. Sisko stood once again in the Enterprise observation lounge, arms clasped behind his back. Captain Picard turned from the window, his expression tight and disapproving. It has been terminated. Sisko shuddered with a sudden chill. Terminated? The scene shifted to the bridge of the Saratoga. Locutus was on the main view screen. Our existence is disrupted whenever one of you enters the passage. Ensign Tamamota turned from her console and faced Sisko. Your linear nature is inherently destructive. You have no regard for the consequences of your acts. Sisko raised his voice in protest. That's not true. We're aware that every choice we make has a consequence. Suddenly, the fishing pond, the trees, the shade, Jake dangling his legs in the water. The boy was frowning. Then how can you take responsibility for your actions? Sisko was weary of explaining, but unwilling to surrender. We use past experience to guide us. For Jennifer and me, all the experiences in our lives prepared us for the day we met on the beach and helped us recognize that we had a future together. When we married, we accepted all the consequences of that act, whatever they might be, including the consequence of you. The boy drew back, puzzled.
Me?
My son, Jake. In sickbay, newborn Jake, swaddled in a blanket, nestled in his father's arms. Cisco grinned from ear to ear. He turned and looked over to see Jennifer, flushed and exhausted. She whispered, "The child with Jennifer. Linear procreation?" Cisco nodded with excitement. She was beginning to understand. Yes, Jake is a continuation of our family. Cisco was now on the pitcher's mound. He snapped his arm gracefully and hurled a perfect fastball at the batter, who swung at the air. The ball smacked into the catcher's, Jake's, glove. It's a game that Jake and I play on the holodeck. It's called baseball. Jake rose out of his crouch behind home plate, took off the catcher's mask and stared at it curiously. He tossed the ball to his father. "Baseball? What is this?" Cisco caught the ball in his glove. I was afraid you'd ask that. Well, here goes. I throw the ball to you, and this other player stands between us with a stick, a bat, and he tries to hit the ball in between these two white lines. The batter might swing and miss. He might hit it. You never know. You try to anticipate, set a strategy for all the possibilities as best you can, but in the end, it all comes down to throwing one pitch after another and seeing what happens. With each new consequence, the game begins to take shape. In fact, the game wouldn't be worth playing if we knew what was going to happen. Jake squinted in disbelief. You value your ignorance of what is to come? Cisco nodded, driving home his point. That may be the most important thing to understand about humans. It is the unknown that defines our existence. We explore our lives day by day, and we explore the galaxy. That is why I'm here. Not to conquer you, but to coexist and learn. Jake ran the back of his hand across his forehead, wiping away perspiration. Cisco waited, hopeful for a response, and glanced back down at the baseball in his grasp. The ball had disappeared. Cisco gasped and recoiled from the sight of his hands scorched and bloody. He was in his quarters aboard Saratoga, Rannoch beside him, the deck ripped asunder, flames shooting up from below. Jake, unconscious, and peeking out from the edge of the scorched bulkhead, Jennifer's lifeless hand. He heard Rannoch's voice over the crackling of the flames. "If all you say is true, why do you exist here?" Cisco stared at him wildly, beyond understanding. Minutes after the space station had arrived at the wormhole site, Major Kira stood in ops, watching 3 Cardassian warships approach on the view screen. She was not surprised. She knew the Cardassian mind well. She had grown up under their rule in a refugee camp after seeing her home, her family destroyed. She had known this would happen. Surrounding her, at their stations, O'Brien, Dax, Odo, and Bashir waited for direction. "Mr. O'Brien, can you establish a high-energy Thoron field before they get into sensor range? I don't want them to be able to scan our defense systems." "Aye, sir." Dax turned to Kira. "They're hailing us." Kira turned her attention back to the site of the warships. The image before her flickered, became that of a Cardassian commander in his ready room. Balding, slightly plump, he studied his nails, then glanced at Kira with unmasked contempt.
May I speak with the Starfleet commander?
He's not available. The Cardassian's full upper lip curled slightly.
I'm not used to talking to Bajorn majors.
I'm all you've got.
I am Gul Jasad of the Cardassian Guard 7th Order. Where is our warship?
With any luck, they're in the Gamma Quadrant, on the other side of the wormhole. Jasad rose half out of his chair, his face contorted with rage.
What wormhole? Our sensors show no indication of a wormhole in this sector.
Kira played the game. That's because it just collapsed. Dax spoke up from her station. We believe it was artificially created. Brows knit in a scowl, Jasad shook his head.
You expect me to believe that someone created a wormhole and now conveniently disassembled it?
Jasad's image disappeared abruptly, replaced by that of his warship. O'Brien called to Kira. They're powering up their forward phasers. Kira looked at O'Brien. Red alert. Shields up. O'Brien began working his panels. What shields? I can transfer all available power to establish partial shields around critical areas, but if they hit the docking ring, we'll sustain heavy damage. Kira gave him a look that said, "Do it," and turned to Odo. Constable, if you would coordinate moving all personnel to safer locations. Odo responded by moving swiftly toward the promenade. Kira turned to Dax. Lieutenant, what was the last reported position of the Enterprise? At least 20 hours away. Kira knew it was impossible for the virtually unarmed station to last even 10 minutes against 3 Cardassian warships. But she had been up against impossible odds her entire life. We've got to hold out until it gets here. Most times, she had no faith in the prophets. She had seen too many of her people killed for that, although she respected their religion. Yet she had believed in them all the nights she had had the dream about Sisko. And now she was moved to desperation. It was not right, it was not fair that the commander should try so hard to help, should risk his life on behalf of her people, only to fail, to die. And if the Kai had chosen Sisko as the messenger of the prophets, then why did they abandon him now? Help him. Help us. If you can hear me, if you can sense what is going on, if you exist at all, help. On the promenade, Odo spoke in a voice loud enough for the passing pedestrians to take notice. Everyone is to evacuate this area and proceed to the Central Market area. Stay away from the buildings. Out of the crowd, the commander's son Jake appeared before him. The boy was near a state of panic. Wait, my dad. I know he went out on the runabout. Is he back yet? A glimmer of discomfort crossed the shapeshifter's face. I don't have time for this. A memory surfaced unbidden in Jake's mind. Him, 3 years younger and glancing up that last day aboard the Saratoga to see the wall burst into flames and come hurtling down toward him. He felt suddenly near tears. Please, Constable, has my dad come back? Odo hesitated, his expression unreadable. No. The runabout has disappeared inside the wormhole. Jake was unable to comprehend, to make sense of anything except the clutching fear. Please, move to the evacuation area. Odo hurried off before Jake could ask any more questions. Jake stood, numbed by the realization. Dad and the runabout were lost, which meant they might not ever be found. He glanced up at the tug on his sleeve.
The Ferengi boy Nog was looking at him with an odd mixture of impatience and compassion.
Come on, Jake. We have to go.
Inside his quarters aboard the dying Saratoga, Sisko coughed and fanned billowing smoke away in an effort to breathe, shrank from the unbearable heat on his exposed face, neck, hands, shrank from the unbearable sight of Jennifer and Jake crushed beneath the bulkhead. I told you, I didn't want to be here. What's the point of bringing me back again to this? Rannoch's pale blue face undulated in the heat waves thrown off by the fire. You exist here. We do not bring you here. Behind him, Sisko saw Jennifer, 15 years younger and wearing the dress she had worn the day he had proposed in Zagi Park. We do not bring you here. You bring us here. Rannoch gave a single, sympathetic nod. You exist here. Sisko raised a trembling hand to his warm, sweat-beaded forehead. Whatever it is we're trying to do here, let's get it over with. Enough! Opaka smiled at him through the veil of smoke and flame as she leaned forward on her cane. Look for solutions from within, Commander. Sisko gazed on his past, aware of others watching beside him. Jake, Jennifer, Opaka, Rannoch. I was ready to die. Rannoch looked at him, uncomprehending. Die? What is this? Sisko opened his mouth, prepared once again to explain, but it was Jennifer who answered. The termination of their linear existence. He glanced at her in amazement. She reached out toward him and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. Then he looked deep into eyes that were at once familiar and alien, but filled with new understanding. His gaze swept the twisted wreckage of what had been his life aboard Saratoga. The flames leaping up through the ripped deck, the body of his wife pinned beneath the collapsed bulkhead. And the simple realization struck him so forcefully, so resoundingly, that he wondered at his own blindness. I've never left this ship. The Jennifer beside him nodded, her warm hand still lightly on his shoulder. You exist here. Sisko looked at the hellish scene surrounding him. I don't know if you can understand. I see Jennifer, trapped beneath the wreckage every time I close my eyes. In the darkness, in the blink of an eye, she's there. Jennifer's voice, the alien voice, came from behind him. None of your past experiences help prepare you for this consequence. Sisko shook his head, slowly. And I've never figured out how to live without her. The Jennifer alien moved beside him. So you choose to live here. It is not linear. A wave of emotion swept over him, and at last broke. No, it's not linear. Sisko knelt in the wreckage and wept amid the flames. The alien stood quietly as he grieved. There were no more questions left. No longer any need for words. The Jake alien graced him with a faint smile and a look of compassionate understanding. Sisko wiped the tears from his cheeks and returned the smile with gratitude. Lieutenant Dax looked up from her ops station. Their lead ship is hailing us. Gul Jasad wants an answer. Kira acknowledged with a swift nod and turned toward the engineering station.
The lives of Cisco and everyone on the station depended now on whether they were able to pull the deception off. "Are you ready, Mr. O'Brien?"
Yes, sir. When they penetrate our Thoron field, it should raise a few eyebrows over there.
Then let's give them our answer. Fire 6 photons across Jassad's bow. O'Brien released a faint noise of surprise.
We only have 6 photons, Major.
Kira kept her gaze fastened on the screen.
We're not going to win this battle with torpedoes, Ensign.
Kira watched with anxious exhilaration as a torpedo streaked through the starlit blackness and exploded in dazzling bursts just off the lead warship's starboard bow.
O'Brien looked up. An urgent hail from Jassad.
On screen, Jassad was composed, although there was a clear note of incredulity in his tone.
This is your answer?
Kira's stance was defiant as she placed a palm firmly on the situation table beside her.
You don't think Starfleet took command of this space station without the ability to defend it, do you?
His full lips twisted into a sneer.
Your space station could not defend itself against one Cardassian warship.
She drew herself to her full height and took a menacing step toward the screen.
You're probably right, Jassad. And if you were dealing with a Starfleet officer, they'd probably admit, we have a hopeless cause here.
But I am just a Bajoran who's been fighting a hopeless cause against Cardassians all her life. So if you want a war, I'll give you one. She drew back, her chest heaving with honest rage. The Cardassian shook his head, speechless at her impudence. The screen darkened abruptly, and Jassad's image was replaced by that of stars and ships. Aboard the bridge of the Cardassian warship, Jassad stared at the space station on his view screen. He had no idea what to make of the Bajoran Major's threat. How could he be sure such threats were idle, now that Starfleet had command of the base? His first officer gave a slight bow from the shoulders and waited for Jassad to signal with a nod before beginning to speak.
They were using a Thoron field to block out Sensor's Gull, but we were able to penetrate it.
Jassad ran a finger across his lips to his chin.
What are their defenses?
According to our scans, an estimated 5,000 photons, integrated phaser banks on all levels. Jassad frowned in amazement. When did they transport all these armaments? How did they install them without our knowledge? Oh, somehow, they've created a massive illusion of duranium shadows. His officer leaned toward him. Why risk a confrontation, Gull? The Fourth Order can be here in a day. Jassad sighed in utter frustration. And so can Starfleet. On Deep Space Nine, Bashir turned toward Dax as if to clasp her in joy.
They went for it! We've done it!
Frowning faintly at her console, Dax addressed Kira. Major, the lead ship is sending out a subspace message asking for reinforcements. Kira stared at the screen. She had dealt too long with Cardassians to trust them.
Too soon for a victory celebration, Doctor. Mr. O'Brien.
The ensign checked his readouts, recoiling slightly at what he saw.
The ships are being deployed into a standard attack formation, sir.
Bashir fell silent. Kira exchanged grim glances with O'Brien and Dax. She felt sorry that they would have to die. Battle stations. The ops deck shuddered beneath the heels of Kira's boots. She shifted her weight, managing to keep her balance. Not a direct hit, thank the prophets. As the station rocked under the impact, O'Brien called to her.
They may just be testing us. I could run a pulse compression wave through the phaser banks, put out a blast that'll make them think twice.
Kira clutched the console with one hand as the deck shook again. Do it. She watched along with the others as the phaser blast streaked toward the Cardassian warship and made contact with the vessel. But the Cardassians' fire showed no sign of easing. Kira held on with both hands as the station rocked. Damage report. Direct hit. Level 14. Empty storage bays, no casualties. Her sense of relief was short-lived. Dax called to her. Shields are down to 27%. Just then, Kira's world heaved to one side with a deafening roar, slamming her face down onto the deck. O'Brien reached for his console and pulled himself back to his feet. Dax called out over the chaos. A fuel conduit has ruptured on the promenade. Major Kira addressed O'Brien. Can you divert the main power flow? His fingers began working his panel before she could get the words out, but the result made him grimace in frustration. Controls are locked. A voice emanated from the comm grid. Odo to Ops. I've got wounded people down here. Have you seen that doctor of yours anywhere? Kira turned toward Bashir, but he was already moving for the turbo lift. For the first time, the Major was honestly glad to have the young doctor on the station. O'Brien wondered if it mattered that much. They were all dying now. It was just a matter of time before the Cardassians managed to rupture another fuel line, and another, until the station went up in a blaze that would light up the Bajoran sky like a small sun. The turbo lift had just descended out of sight when the station reeled again, and again. Dax called to the officers. Shields at 18% and falling. Kira dragged her fingers across the console edge as if to dig them into the metal, staring at the warships with a bitter sense of failure and depthless rage at herself for trusting the prophets and her own foolish dreams. Her whole life had been one protracted struggle against this enemy, and now she had lost. Just as her people, her planet, would ultimately lose. O'Brien must have sensed her desperation. I might still be able to give you one more round, Major. Kira pulled her hand away from the console and stood without support. No. Signal the lead Cardassian ship that we will proceed with the... Dax interrupted, her normally even tone filled with an excitement that made Kira turn her head to stare at her. Major, I'm reading a neutrino disturbance. 15 kilometers off the forward docking ring. It's the wormhole. On screen, the wormhole exploded into view, shattering the darkness with a shimmering rainbow blaze of light, looking to Kira like the celestial temple. It was the most beautiful sight she had ever seen. In the mouth of the wormhole, the tiny runabout appeared, followed by a gigantic Cardassian warship some 50 times its size. Sisko's voice, loud and triumphant, came over the comm. Sisko to DS9. Kira could not quite keep herself from grinning like a fool at the sight of Sisko on screen, perfectly unharmed and grinning like a bit of a fool himself. Sorry to be so late. I didn't know we were having company. Clear me for docking, Mr. O'Brien. Aye, sir. Cleared for pad C. Kira laughed as, for the first time, she realized the firing had stopped. When Sisko stepped through the airlock onto the promenade, he was feeling like a man reborn. For the first time in 3 years, he felt freed of his grief, freed of the past, able to look at the future. The clouds of guilt and self-pity had lifted, leaving him with clear vision. He knew what he wanted. He wanted to remain on DS9, wanted to continue to help the Bajorans. But turning down the position at Vesteris University was not a decision he could make alone. He would have to talk about it with Jake. The boy's feelings had to be considered. Sisko's attention drifted to the promenade. One of the shop fronts had been heavily damaged, and he could see where one of the buried fuel lines had erupted, scorching the deck. Odo and Bashir were crouched over a wounded Bajoran and talking in such a decidedly amicable fashion that Sisko did a mild double-take. Jake ran out of the crowd and threw himself into his father's arms. Sisko hugged the boy with a surge of love so fierce, he blinked back tears. Dad, I was so scared you wouldn't come back. Sisko patted his son's back as he would an infant's.
It's okay. I'm home. Hey, you smell like smoke.
You okay?
Yeah, there was a fire, but it got put out. You should have seen it, Dad. It was real scary for a while. The Cardassians were firing on us, and the whole promenade was shaking, and even after Odo said the runabout had disappeared in the wormhole, I knew you'd come back. Jake stopped and blinked as though the thought had finally occurred to him. Are you okay, Dad? What happened out there? I've never been better. I'll tell you all about it when we get back to our quarters. He slipped an arm around the boy's shoulders, and together they walked over to Odo and Bashir. The Bajoran woman they were tending smiled in faint recognition up at him. Sisko asked about casualties. Bashir looked up at him. 13 injured, Commander. None seriously. Sisko nodded and moved with Jake toward a turbolift. There's something I need to talk to you about tonight. A decision I need you to help me make. I got a job offer earlier today as a professor at a university. A university? You mean you'd be a teacher? Jake wrinkled his nose at the thought. Well, is that really what you want to do, Dad? Doesn't sound very exciting. It's at Visteris University, Jake. On Earth. He braced himself for an excited outburst, for Jake to fling himself into his father's arms again, but instead, the boy frowned. I thought you'd be happy, Jake. Well, I guess I'm happy if you're happy. I just don't care anymore, Dad. I want you to do what you want to do. And I'd have to leave Nog. I mean, I hardly had any time to get to know him. A slow smile spread over Sisko's face. He patted the boy's shoulder gently. I think we can manage to give you that time, Jake. Before he could say more, the lift came to a stop at Ops. As the two of them stepped out, Dax called to him. The Cardassians are waiting to speak to you, Benjamin. The images of Gul Jasad and Dukat appeared before him on the view screen. Sisko graced them with a tight little smile. Welcome back, Gul Dukat. Dukat revealed a white sliver of teeth. Commander, I'm pleased that we were able to escort you safely home. Sisko exchanged a faintly amused look with Kira. Gentlemen, I've made contact with the life forms that created this wormhole. Jasad straightened and gave a threatening look. Then I must state our position, that this phenomenon is clearly in territory that has been controlled by the Cardassian Empire for 6 decades, and as such... Sisko cut him off. I've made an agreement with these beings on behalf of the planet Bajor that allows for safe passage through the wormhole. Those who violate that agreement will find themselves lost between here and the Gamma Quadrant. If you care to challenge what I am saying, I suggest you fly back into the wormhole and see for yourselves. A long silence passed as the Cardassians scowled at him, and then Dukat addressed him with no small amount of bitterness. Just who are these beings? Sisko opened his mouth to begin a long explanation, then stopped and smiled faintly as a simpler, truer answer occurred to him. The prophets of the Celestial Temple. He turned to find Kira gazing at him with unmasked wonder. The following day, the Enterprise returned, and Jean-Luc Picard requested permission to board the space station and hear firsthand from Sisko what had happened. When Sisko glanced up from his monitor in his office and saw Picard lingering in the doorway, he rose and extended his hand. This time, Sisko smelled no smoke, heard no wailing, saw no red flash of a sensor scope, no monstrous hybrid of metal and skin. This time, he saw only a man, a very human man built of flesh and blood, who had been deeply scarred by the Borg. Sisko forgot his own pain and considered Picard's, and felt ashamed of his earlier behavior. He clasped Picard's hand firmly
and was relieved when the pressure was returned. Picard narrowed his eyes slightly, curious at this sudden warmth. Sisko wanted to say, "Forgive me," but the words died in his throat. Instead, he smiled in apology. Picard caught the smile and returned it. Sisko released Picard's hand and motioned for the captain to sit. Picard spoke first. "So, Commander, apparently your transfer to DS9 has already borne fruit. I'm most curious to hear how you would manage to locate the wormhole." Sisko grinned and told him, explaining everything. Picard listened with great interest, nodding with approval at Sisko's praise for his officers, and at his optimistic outlook on the effect the wormhole would have on the Bajoran economy. "It seems you've put Bajor on the map, Commander. This should become a leading center of commerce and scientific exploration. And for Starfleet, one of our most important ports." Sisko hesitated, and then looked at Picard. "Captain, regarding our conversation about someone to replace me..." Picard's expression grew opaque, unreadable. "I'm sorry, I haven't had the time to communicate it to command." Sisko relaxed in relief. "I would prefer you ignore it, sir." "I'm not sure I can, Commander. Are you certain this is what you want? Because we can't afford to have someone in command here who..." "I'm certain, sir." Picard regarded him in silence for some time, and then he stood and stretched his open hand across the commander's desk. "Good luck, Sisko. Good luck to you, sir." And Sisko had no doubt that the captain understood perfectly well what was meant. Sisko transported planetside alone, save for a very special burden, carefully hidden from sight in its receptacle. This time, as he walked down Bajor's streets, his attention was drawn not to the destroyed buildings, but to the signs of rebuilding, of new life. Shopkeepers had set up an open-air market in the square near the temple, and the air was filled with the voices of haggling merchants and buyers. In the distance, the Aubergine Mountains stood, serene and breathtakingly beautiful. Sisko came to the entrance of the great stone temple and paused before stepping from the bright sunlight into the cool shadows. A young monk appeared almost immediately and bowed from the shoulders. "Commander, welcome." Sisko smiled, returned the bow. The monk turned and strode briskly through the great, echoing chamber. Sisko followed. The exterior walls had been patched, and monks now worked on restoring the interior ones. Kaiopaka stepped forward out of the darkness. Her smile was as radiant as Sisko's own. "Commander Sisko, I see you have brought us yet another gift." Sisko laughed aloud. "No, Opaka, just returning one you gave me." He followed her to the reflecting pool holograph, and together they went downstairs into the secret chamber. Opaka gently took the ark from him and placed it on the shelf. Sisko smiled faintly. 14 planets have already contacted us about opening trade routes through Bajoran space. Opaka nodded as she turned to him. "The prophets have been generous." He moved toward her, eager to tell of the amazing, timeless beings within the wormhole. "I have a lot to tell you about your prophets, Opaka." She silenced him with a wave. "Does it surprise you that I do not wish to hear?" He drew back, disappointed at not being able to share all that he had learned. But then he considered her point of view and gave her a small, understanding smile. She returned it with relief. "Perhaps that is why a disbeliever was destined to seek them. One should never look into the eyes of her own gods." Sisko nodded and sighed at the memory. It was Quite a journey. She took a step toward him and reached for his jaw with gentle fingers, tracing her way up to his ear. This time, he relaxed and did not recoil from her touch, and felt no pain. Interesting, Commander. This is only the beginning of your journey.
Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Emissary, was performed by Nana Visitor. The novelization was by J.M. Dillard, based on the teleplay by Michael Piller. Story by Rick Berman and Michael Piller. It was abridged for audio by George Truitt and directed by Bob Walter. Post-production by Stephen Erickson. Original music was composed by Carl Sharif, Sam McCallie, Eve Beglarian, Richard Emmett, and Carl Schurtz. Theme music from the Star Trek television series was composed by Alexander Courage and Gene Roddenberry and used courtesy of Bruin Music. The associate producers were Linda Woolman and Jan Werner. Deep Space Nine, Emissary, was produced by Karen Frillman.